Hare Krishna. So we welcome everyone for today's Bhagavad Gita session, which is part of our Bhakti Shastri class. We'll start with the prayers, and then today we are going to continue with the discussion on the sixth chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the remaining verses of sixth chapter. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam yena bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesh Shunyavadi Pashyataya Deshatarine Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gautase Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyasya Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesh Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So once again, we welcome each and every one of you for joining today's discussion. We'll start with the presentation here. Just one second. Let me just open the presentation here. So we are discussing on the sixth chapter of Bhagavad Gita, and we'll start with a recap of what we discussed last time, and then we'll take the discussion ahead. A second. And the presentation is working. Great. So chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita, titled as Dhyan Yoga. And for this chapter, the acronym, which kind of helps us to understand how the flow of discussion going on, is easy. Where in the first 9 verses, there was a discussion on about the mind being our best of the friend, and the mind being our worst of our enemy. If the mind is controlled, it becomes the best of the friend. If uncontrolled, remains the worst of the enemy. And then what are the process? What are the steps to practice Ashtanga Yoga was the second part of this discussion of this chapter from verse number 10. Along with that, there are two kinds of yogis. One is advanced Ashtanga yogi, one is a neophyte yogi. And then what are the symptoms of an advanced yogi were also discussed in this section. Also, in this section, another important discussion was the process have been described, the results have been described. It's just like you go to a doctor, the doctor gives you the medicine, and doctor tells you when you take the medicine, 5 days from now, you'll recover. But there are also certain regulations, prohibitions. So what regulations? That were also discussed in these set of verses. And then we have the third section of this chapter, which is very, very vital discussion, very important discussion, is about success or failure. So if you see in general, people with different intentions, they take to the path of yoga. In case of all of us as bhakti yogis or yoginis, for that reason, All of us have come to this path for various reasons that will be discussed here. One could be somebody was inquisitive, somebody was looking for absolute truth, and that primarily owes to his previous life punya karma, previous life practice, because of which he was looking for something higher. And because of that inquiry and because of eagerness, he came across Srila Prabhupada books, he came across devotees, and he took up to bhakti. Now, even in this case, the person was serious, sincere about practicing, yet there are chances of him getting distracted because we live in the world of temptations and distractions. So, a very valid question: what is the destination of a person who started his spiritual practice with a very serious note, was sincere all through, but somehow later in future he got distracted, he got allured by the temptations of material energy. So what is the gati of such a person? And then there are others who joined because they were undergoing certain suffering, certain problems, and they felt in this association, I am feeling comfortable, I'm feeling relaxed, and I'm feeling a little bit sense of freedom from my misery. So then there are the people who also join, they become part of the forum. Their intention was not to search for absolute truth. Their intention was not to inquire about him. They were just trying to inquire, why am I suffering? Or, they just want to get relief from their suffering. So again, they are sincere practitioners, no doubt about it. But it may be possible once their expectation or once their immediate needs are fulfilled, then they may just drop the process. But ultimately, to practice four regulative principles, chanting of 16 rounds of Hare Krishna Mahamantra every day, which means every week, which means every year for the rest of your life, that's not going to be easy. So in case somebody takes to the process but has a lot of material desires and then quits the path, leaves it just after short practice, what happens to him? That kind of discussion happens in the third section. And then finally, the fourth, after describing Karma Yogi, Jnana Yogi, Ashtang Yogi, or Hatha Yogi, or Dhyana Yogi, and also the Bhakti Yogi, when we have varieties, variegatedness, obviously the question arises, which one is the best? So Lord Shri Krishna introduces all those different paths and practices, and then finally he concludes. He gives this conclusion: who among all these is the best according to him? So that is what chapter 6 talks about. And for today's discussion, we're going to complete this chapter, Krishna willing, from verse number 28 or 24, I believe. We have to carry forward our discussion like that. So before we get into it, let's do a quick recap of what we discussed last time. So last time when I began my discussion, I started with talking about Nishkam Karma Yoga, the process, the expectations and requirements to practice Nishkam Karma Yoga. Because Lord Shri Krishna, if you see third chapter, fourth, fifth chapter, time and again he's saying the same thing. Third chapter, Mai Sarvani Karmani Sanyasya Dehatma Chetasa. And the same thing in the fourth chapter, similarly, same thing in the fifth chapter, Lord Shri Krishna says, Arjuna, fight, perform your duty, but give up the desire to enjoy the results. Use the results in my service. Be dutiful, become dutiful, perform your duties properly. Like that, Lord Shri Krishna has been speaking about it. So the question, which was an obvious question, now in Nishkam Karma Yoga, the most difficult thing to follow in this path is that I'm asked to work. What is that? Karmina evadi karaste. I've been told to do my work is my adhikar. Ma phaleshu kadachan. But I don't have any hak on my or rights on my result. Ma karma phal heturbur. Nor I should consider myself the cause of my work, and so forth. Ma ate sangasa karmani, like that. So my point here is, it ain't gonna be easy where I work, but I cannot enjoy the results of my work. So Krishna is saying, this is what Arjuna is supposed to do. So we had a discussion last time, why we should do this, or how can I do this, how can I practice it? And then I made a point, it's not an easy journey, it's not an easy path to practice, to be able to not enjoy the results of one's action. However, there is a possibility, because many have done it. And that possibility only arises when our objective is very clear. When it is very clear, when the goal is very clear, what I am going to get after doing this, And it's just not that the objective would be accomplished in a week's time, month's time, or year's time. It can take a whole life. But when the objective is clear and the faith is strong on that objective, then the person can practice it. Otherwise, if faith is feeble, faith is weak, pliable, then it's very difficult for this path to be practiced. We can do a little bit, but not in entirety. So, what is the objective? Does anyone remember when we had a discussion? I'm not going to ask you what was the discussion about. I told you a whole story about that what Krishna is actually indicating from where we should start and where we should go. Anyone remembers what's the objective, or what should, what's an objective for a devotee? And to accomplish that objective, Krishna says, practice Nishkam Karma Yoga. What is that? Okay, let me go to the screen here. Anyone? Hey, by the way, am I audible? All of you looking at the screen, I'm getting a little confused if I'm audible or not.
Yes, Prabhuji, you're audible.
Okay. Mother Indu Radhika,
Yeah,
what
Prabhuji,
is
I will
that
try.
objective?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, I will try. Actually, I think you were telling last time that we should be desireless. We should engage our senses as in Karma Yoga, and our mind as in Jnana Yoga, our intelligence in Ashtanga Yoga, and our heart basically in Bhakti Yoga.
Okay, you're describing yoga ladder. I'm asking the objective of a Nishkam Karma Yoga or my practices. Good attempt.
We should
Mother
be
Rati Manjari. Yeah, go ahead, Mother Indu.
we should be attached to our work and not to the results. That's the thing basically you're trying to say.
Not exactly. That is what Krishna is saying. I'm trying to discuss what's the objective of this action. Yes, Mother Rati Manjari. Oh, sorry, unmute. Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, please accept my humble obeisances.
Can you be a little
Prabhuji,
louder, please?
Prabhuji, is it having faith in one's guru and surrendering?
Now, what is the objective? What is the goal you're looking at?
Goal is to reach Krishna Prem.
Okay. The goal is to attain Krishna Prem, correct? So if you remember last time, I had taken you on a journey of how Krishna says, how can you, I mean, we had kind of brought our objective to be back home, back to Godhead. To be precisely, back home, back to Godhead. That's what we had discussed. And of a back home, back to Godhead, why? Mamopetya punajanma dukhalayam ashashvatam. We have discussed all that verses from, Bhagavad Gita in different places. And then we had at the end also discussed the differences between material world and the spiritual world. Why we discussed all that, in material world, you have birth, death, old age, disease, you're bound by the three modes of material nature, is a place of darkness, ignorance, etc., etc. Whereas in spiritual world is Satchidananda, we quoted the verse Chintamani Prakrasatma Shukal Parviksha. We also quoted Shriya Kanta Kanta, another verse from Brahma Samhita like that. The life, every step there is a dance, every word spoken there is a song. Life is full of colors and bliss. Every sand particle is Chintamani stone. Every tree is a Kalpavriksha. Every cow is a Madhasurbi. Like that, we had a little discussion. So there I said, unless our mind is fixed on that goal and what we're going to get it, or what I'm doing by which what I'm going to get it, it's very difficult to actually really step up. Of course, it all begins with faith. So when our faith on that objective is very strong, to that degree our practice becomes strong. Is that making sense? Yes or no? Think about if our faith on the goal is not strong enough. How many of you agree? The practice is also very gullible. Just like you would have seen when new people come to the Krishna consciousness, they struggle a lot to chant 16 hours of Hare Krishna Mahamantra, even in quantity. Why? Because their faith on the objective is very weak. But when, for us, our faith becomes a little more stronger, we hear the glories of chanting, we understand that, then we come to chanting of 16 hours. That same thing follows into this practice also. To the degree of our faith and the objective or the goal is set, to that degree we can practice this Nishkam Karma Yoga or take to the practice. Anyways, let's move forward. That was the first part of discussion we had. And then we had, if Lord wants Arjuna to follow Nishkam Karma Yoga, then why is he discussing, or why did he discuss Ashtanga Yoga? These are questions for all of you. Huh? we are coming to the conclusion of 6 chapters. The unit 1 ends today. So I thought before you appear for your final exam, why don't we have one Viva exam today? So just to know how much you have prepared, how much you have understood. So why? Question again. Why Krishna is speaking about Ashtanga Yoga if he wants us to perform Nishkam Karma Yoga? Yes, Tejasvu, sitting over here. Okay, so Tejasvu sitting here in the audience says because it's not possible for the Kali Yuga residents to practice Ashtanga Yoga. By talking about it, Krishna is actually talking about the impossibility of its practice in current day and time. So Krishna is giving a message to all those Hatha yogis who opened a yoga centers and they charge per hour fees that you're making a fool out of people. You're not doing anything like that. Okay, that was a point. Good. Let's move forward. Who is a yogi? We discussed about sannyasi and yogi. Chapter 6 begins with that, right? Yogi and sannyasi. Who is a yogi? Who is a sannyasi? Maithini, go ahead. Unmute, please. Not audible, Mother Maithini. Yeah, a little louder. You're too feeble. Yes, good now.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, yes.
So, a sannyasi is one who gives up his action and as well the desire for the result, because obviously there's no action. But a yogi is one who does the action but gives up the desire for the result.
Oh, what is the difference? You kind of said the same thing.
No, because sannyasi doesn't perform action.
Yes, correct. So he has given up the actions and there's no question of the results. A yogi has given up on the desire to enjoy the results. Therefore, it is called Nishkama Karma Yoga. Bhakti Yoga, like that. Correct. So that's difference. Good point. Next, what is a yoga ladder? Would anyone like to define yoga ladder? Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. Now, this could be a little difficult question. But if anyone wants to give a try, what is this yoga ladder concept? We'll see that in today's discussion also in Prabhupada's purport in one of the concluding verses. Prabhupada talks about it once again. But just to see how well we have understood, these are some important subject matters. What is a yoga ladder? Hey, be assured, this is 200% your exam question. They're going to ask you for your exam. Okay, Mother Chintamani, your hand is up. Go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dandavat
Yes, ma'am.
Pranam.
Dandavat Pranam.
The thing is, we all have some desires in the beginning, and then that is in the Karma Kanda section. And then gradually with purification, we start giving part of our results in service of the Lord, though we still have desires. That is the Sakam Karma Yoga platform. And after that, doing it for some maybe lifetimes, we come to the conclusion that there is no end to desires. So we start practicing, the yogi starts practicing Nishkam Karma Yoga in the sense that he is not attached to the results anymore, but he is attached to the action. He is attached to the action he performs, but he's not attached to the results. Now, doing this is Nishkam Karma Yoga. And doing this, what happens, he undergoes further purification when he is in a point where he can give up action and take to Jnana Yoga. And because he has purified his desires, and now he is in a position to take up renunciation and become a Jnani. But in this, what happens is Bhakta usually does his Nishkam Karma Yoga for the Lord, and he automatically goes into the platform of Bhakti Yogi. And but here in Jnana Yoga, which is renunciation, it is he has to do a lot of those dry speculation and all to find out who is the absolute truth. But in Bhakti Yoga, when he goes from Nishkam Karma Yoga to Bhakti Yoga, he is knowing who is the Lord. And then after further purification in Jnana Yoga, he then is qualified to become an Ashtanga Yogi, where in the first 4 steps are the steps for the Hatha Yoga, and then the last 4 steps are for the Dhyana Yoga. And then in the Dhyana Yoga, when he keeps on purifying himself, he comes to a stage when he is able to perceive the Lord. He is able to hold his attention on the Lord in the heart. And that is the time he realizes who is the Lord. And then he starts his bhakti. So now the Dhyana Yoga, up this ladder, took so much time to realize who is the absolute truth. And then he starts his Bhakti Yoga. So ultimately, both are leading to Bhakti Yoga, but in this process, sometimes people get distracted. They may go to impersonalism also. From the Gyani stage, they can go to impersonalism and think of getting merging with the Brahma Jyoti. And all of them don't come to the Bhakti Yoga stage. Hare Krishna. That's what I
Correct.
understood.
Thank you so much. Very, very detail oriented and perfectly explained. So moving forward ahead, so that was Yoga Ladder. And along with that, there was a discussion for steps for practicing Ashtanga Yoga from verse number 10 to 15. And then question came, are there any regulations on the path of yoga? So are there any regulations on the path of yoga? If in case any one of you remember any regulations. What regulations? Do we have to have any regulations on the path of yoga? Now, this is for Ashtanga Yoga, but it is as much as true for Bhakti Yogi also, or Nishkam Karma Yogi. Yes, Sunny Prabhu, what's your answer?
Sir, Hare Krishna Prabhuji, it's 4 regulative principles and regulated sleeping and regulated eating, I think.
Those 4 regulative principles are already understood, because otherwise it leads to a sinful life. So here the regulation which is being talked about is about regulated ahara, vihara, cheshta, swapna, vabodhasya, like that. Correct. A regulated lifestyle is recommended. So that was a discussion. And then we also had a discussion on symptoms of an advanced yogi. So this was kind of a high level thing that we discussed last time. Let's take a quick look. Ashtanga Yogi or Ashtanga Yoga. There are 8 steps, just like as Mother said, Hatha Yoga, the first 4 steps, Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, and then we have the last step for Dhyana, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. As we have discussed last time, so I'm not reflecting on it much. Moving forward, what is Yama? Yama refers to kind of, Niyam means to follow regulations. Yama means prohibitions. So here Yama refers to social discipline like ahimsa, non-violence, satya, satya, not stealing, brahmacharya, like that. And then niyama, saucha, santosha, tapas, swadhyaya, ishwara pranidhana, surrender to God. The practices to be possessed, like that, or to cultivate in oneself. So how to practice Ashtanga Yoga, that was a whole discussion which we talked last time. Basic practice of yoga is engage one's mind, body and self in Krishna service. This is Prabhupada's purport. You can understand that. Way to sit while practicing: alone in a secluded sacred place, have a clean place of sitting with a straight back, like that. And while you do this for a good amount of time, however, when you're practicing, there has to be a balance. If somebody eats too much or eats too less, cannot be a yogi. So that was a discussion on importance of balance. We discussed that last time, like that. So up to here, perfection of yoga. Up to verse number 23rd, we had discussed it last time. And now we'll begin our discussion from verse number 24, if I'm correct. Let me take a look at my book. And from there we'll go. So now we'll go through Srila Prabhupada's writings as well as the verses. So 6th chapter, verse number, one second. Oh, I opened the wrong chapter. 6th chapter and precaution. We'll start with verse number 24 actually. So let's start with verse number 24, 6th chapter. So this is again a discussion of from verse number 10 to verse number 36. Discussion is about Ashtanga Yoga. In verse number 24 and 25, here now Lord Shri Krishna talks about the methods to attain advanced stages of yoga. So here he mentioned the first stage and the last stage. What is the first stage of this yoga practice? Reading the translation directly. One should engage oneself in the practice of yoga with determination and faith, not be deviated from the path. One should abandon without exception all material desires born of mental speculation, and thus control all the senses on all sides by the mind. So Prabhupada, in the first few lines of the purport, Prabhupada says, the yoga practitioner should be determined and should patiently prosecute the practice without deviation. One should be sure of success at the end and pursue this course with great perseverance. And in the purport course, example of the sparrow, we discussed that last time. Srila Vishnachakra Thakur quotes the story of a determination of a sparrow whose eggs were stolen by the ocean, like that. And at the end of the purport of this verse, Prabhupada writes, similarly, the practice of yoga, especially Bhakti Yoga and Krishna consciousness, may appear to be a very difficult job. But if anyone follows the principles with great determination, the Lord will surely help. For God helps those who help themselves. Prabhupada is making this point at the end of the story of a sparrow, how the sparrow was helped by Narad Muni and then by Guruji, because the sparrow was determined. So although for sparrow to drive the ocean was almost an impossible task, but became possible by the grace of Narad Muni and Guruji. So similarly, Bhakti Yoga may seem to be very difficult, but one who is focused, determined, Lord helps. And what is the last step? The beginning step is focus and determination and not deviating and having a control on one's mind and senses. And what is the last step of this practice? Text number 25. Shanehe shaner upramet buddhaya dhriti gritaya atma samsam manha kritva na kinchit api chintayat. He does not think of anything else. Shane upramat. Shane, which means step by step. Buddhaya dhriti grihitaya. Upramad, by firm intelligence. In other words, step by step with conviction and determination, the person, the practitioner, keeps moving on. Atma samsam manha kritva, fixing his mind on the self-realization. Atma samsam manha kritva, na kinchit api chintayat. Keeping his mind, in other words, keeping his objective very clear, that is self-realization. He does not allow his mind to be distracted to any subject matter. And step by step, which means gradually, he attains the success or he keeps moving forward. That is a point which is mentioned here. So, translation, gradually, step by step, one should become situated in trance by means of intelligence sustained by full conviction. And thus the mind should be fixed on the self alone and should think of nothing else. So the question arises, okay, if this is the first and the last step, first step is to control the mind, have a clear goal, and the last step is to observe the mind in the self, in the goal itself. So the question arises, from controlling the mind to the observing the mind, the question arises, are there any precautions, or I should be careful of dealing with the mind? Because the nature of mind, the moment you try to focus, it goes away. So what do I do with it? Very important shloka, text number 26. Yato nischalati manas chanchalamastheram tatastato niyam yaitat atmani eva vasham nayat. Yato, wherever nischalati, yato nischalati manas chanchalam, which is flickering, asthiram, cannot stay at one point or stay at one place, cannot focus on one thing. So the mind is nischalati, is always agitated, is always flickering, and always asthiram, always moving around. Tatas tato niyam yaitat. So how can you bring this mind under control? So tatas tato niyam yaitat. So by niyam, by regulation, atmani eva vasham nayat, you should try to bring your mind under control. What it means, Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur, while explaining this verse, makes a beautiful point. He says, due to our previous lives' sinful actions, or maybe something being done in this life prior to taking to the bhakti life, those subtle experiences called as samskaras remain in the mind. And it may happen that it may manifest at one point of time out of a sudden, and it may distract you from your focus and attention. How many of you, I guess I should not ask this question in a public forum, but many of us would have had an experience when we sit down to chant, then suddenly our mind, all kind of strange thoughts pop up, which doesn't actually come up during the rest of the day. So that is the point here. And sometimes the mind, the thoughts can be really very sinful, abominable. So what to be done? Yato yato nischalati manha chanchalam astiram. Because the nature of the mind is like to be always wandering, always distracted. What one has to do? Tatas tato niyamyetad. Bring it back. Bring it back. In Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur's perspective, when a mind gets attached, or when mind gets perturbed by sinful activities, the thoughts of sinful activities, then bring it back and engage into seva. Bring it back and engage into seva. And for that, perseverance and a certain amount of tolerance is required. That is what is being described here. So that's what Prabhupada writes in the purport also about Goswami and Godasa. Okay, the question arises, what will happen if I practice like this? Although my mind wants to get distracted, mind is finding a great joy in that sinful activity. On contemplating on that sinful activity, now I have to pull my mind, which is going to be very difficult. So it's an austerity. What will I gain by this austerity? Because we have to have certain conviction to be able to practice that tough job. So that answer is verse number 27, 28. What is the result of struggle? Prashanta manasam hi enam yoginam sukama uttamam. Prashant. Such a person becomes peaceful. Why? Because his consciousness is fixed on the lotus feet of the Lord. Prasanta manasam means his mind becomes peaceful. Yoginam sukham uttamam, and he achieves sukham uttamam, the highest happiness. Upati shanta rajasam. Upati shanta rajasam means he gets purified of his mode of goodness. Mode of passion. Just like in the first canto, in the third chapter, there is a verse. What is that? Tada rajastamo lava kama krodha. There is a verse like that which says, so there is a verse, Tada rajastamo lobha. Aise karke there is a verse, I'm missing the line. So in that it is said, one who takes to the practice of the devotional life, gradually his rajagun and tamagun all gets pacified, all gets purified. Like that is mentioned. Upaiti shanta rajasam. Brahma Bhuta Akalmasham. Brahma Bhuta, which means you begin to identify with the Lord. Brahma Bhutam, in our case, becomes situated in his eternal constitutional position as the devotee of the Lord, as a sevak of the Lord. Akalmasham, and freed from all past sinful reactions. Yes, Tada Rajas Tamo Bhava, not Lobha actually. Tada Rajas Tamo Bhava. Kama lobha dayascha cheta etiranavidam sitam satve prasidati. Sitam satve prasidati. Like that, he becomes fixed in his devotional life. Something like that is mentioned here. So what are the results of struggle? Your mind becomes peaceful, attain eternal happiness, freedom from the lower modes of consciousness. Brahma Bhutam gets firmly situated in one's constitutional position. And the fifth, Akalmasham, freedom from all sinful reactions. These are the 5 benefits like this I mentioned. Next, verse number 28. These are the advantages of struggle. Please note that. These are the results of struggle. Those who are struggling, they will get this benefit. Text number 28. Which means those who are beyond the stage of struggle, there is needless to talk about what they would be getting. So, text number 28. Yunjanevam sadatmanam yogi vigatakalmashaha sukhena brahma samsparsham atyantam sukhamashnute. Yunjaneva sadatmanam. Yunjan means being engaged in this yoga practice. Sada, always, Atmanam, Yogi Vigataha Kalmashaha. Such a yogi means who is in touch with the Supreme or the Absolute Truth. Yogi Vigata Kalmasha, he is freed from all sinful reaction. Sukhena Brahma Samsparsham. He gets eternal happiness, and Brahma Samsparshan, he is always in touch with the Absolute Truth. Atyantam Sukham Ashnute. Atyanta means the highest. Ashnute means attains. He attains the highest happiness. Translation. Thus, the self-controlled yogi constantly engaged in yoga practice becomes free from all material contaminations and achieves the highest stage of perfect happiness in transcendental loving service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, so such a person has attained the stage of Brahma Samsparsham, where he is always in contact with the Absolute Truth. So the next obvious question is, at this stage, what is his consciousness? How does he look at the world? The person who is always in contact with the Absolute Truth, how does he look at the world, or what is his consciousness? That has been described in verse number 29 30. Text 29. Sarvabhutastham atmanam sarvabhutani chatmani ikshate yoga yuktatma sarvatra samadarshana. Sarvatra means everywhere. Samadarshana, with an equal vision. What is that equal vision? He sees me within everything, and he sees everything within me. In other words, this is what it means, that now he has kind of understood what is the Absolute Truth, or who is the Absolute Truth. So this is a stage where person is in constant touch with the Absolute Truth. So wherever he sees nothing but Krishna. For example, you remember the famous example of Prabhupada walking on the beach, and the disciples said, Swamiji, dekhiye, how beautiful sunrise. And Prabhupada said, oh, if the sunrise, which means the painting is so beautiful, how much beautiful the painter must be. That's the point here. Who is always conscious and can see the presence of Lord within everything, and presence of and everything within the Lord, like that is mentioned. So let's read the last paragraph of the purport. Anyone would like to read the purport of text number 29, the last paragraph? The yogi sees equally. Yes, Mother Gokila. Go ahead.
The yogi sees equally because he sees that all living entities, although in different situations, according to the results of fruitive work in all circumstances, remain the servants of the God. While in the material energy, the living entities serve the material senses, and which in the spiritual energy he serves the Supreme Lord directly. In either case, the living entity is the servant of God. This vision of equality is perfect in a person in Krishna consciousness.
Hare Krishna. So, very interesting point Prabhupada mentions, So, what is that equal vision for a yogi? He sees that at all times the person is serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. How? The one who is a karmi, he is serving the material energy. The material energy, but nothing but the energy of the Lord. One who is a yogi or a spiritualist, he is serving the spiritual energy, which is again nothing but the energy of the Lord. Like that, Prabhupada explains his point. Now, text number 30. Yomam pashyati sarvatra. Again, discussion on what is the vision of such a yogi, a consciousness. Yomam pashyati sarvatra sarvam chamai pashyati tasyaham na pranashyami sa chamena pranashyati tasya aham na pranashyami. For him I am never lost. Sa chamena pranashyati. And not that person is lost for me. When? Yomam pashyati sarvatra, when he sees me everywhere, sarvam cha mai pashyati, and he sees everything within me. A very beautiful purport, what it means for a Krishna conscious devotee. Mother Manju, please read out the first paragraph of the purport. Unmute, please. Yes.
The first paragraph, Prabhu.
Yes, Mother.
Yeah. A person in Krishna consciousness certainly sees Lord Krishna everywhere, and he sees everything in Krishna. Such a person may appear to see all separate manifestations of the material nature, but in each and every instance he is conscious of Krishna. Knowing that everything is a manifestation of Krishna's energy, nothing can exist without Krishna. And Krishna is the Lord of everything. Shall I read?
Yes. Continue.
Yeah. This is the basic principle of Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is the development of love of Krishna, a position transcendental even to material liberation. At this stage of Krishna consciousness, beyond self realization, the devotee becomes one with Krishna in the sense that Krishna becomes everything for the devotee, and the devotee becomes full in loving Krishna. An intimate relationship between the Lord and the Krishna and the devotee then exists. In that stage, the living entity can never be annihilated, nor is the personality of Godhead ever out of the sight of the devotee. To merge in Krishna is spiritual annihilation. A devotee takes no such risk. It is stated in the
Okay.
Brahma Samhita.
So merging means the Mayavadi concept. That is, please read the last paragraph. At this stage,
At this stage, Lord Krishna never disappears from the sight of the devotee, nor does the devotee ever lose sight of the Lord. In the case of a yogi who sees the Lord as Paramatma within the heart, the same applies. Such a yogi turns into a pure devotee and cannot bear to live for a moment without seeing the Lord within himself. Hare Krishna.
okay. So after describing the vision of such a perfected yogi, what are the actions of such perfected yogi? Text number 31 and 32. Sarvabhuta sitam yo mam bhajati ekatvam asthitah sarvata vartamanopi sa yogi mai vartate. Sarvabhuta stitam yo mam, uh, who understands that I am situated within everyone. Bhajati ekatvam astitaha. And what he does, he serves. Sarvataha vartamano pi. Knowing me to be situated in all respects. Sa yogi mai vartate. Like this, such a yogi always remains in connection with me. Translation: such a yogi who engages in the worshipful service of the super soul, knowing that I and the super soul are one, remains always in me in all circumstances. Sarvabhuta Sitam Yumam. In other words, who understand I and Paramatma one, always remain situated in me in all circumstances. Fine. And then text number 32. Now, this is a very important verse. What are the activities of such an advanced yogi? Text number 32. Atmaopamyena sarvatra samam pashyati yu Arjuna. Hare Krishna. Somebody needs to be muted. Sukham vavadhi va dukkham sa yogi paramo mataha. So here Srila Vishnu Chakra Thakur says, in fact, this should be the vision even at the sadhaka stage. Oh, what is the vision should be there at sadhaka stage? It's a very important vision. We should cultivate this. I request our co-host to see who is unmuted can mute the devotee. Fine. So क्या कहा गया है? आत्माओपमयेन सर्वत्र समम पश्यति यो अर्जुनः. He sees the other's happiness and other's suffering as he has an experience of it, which means an empathy. He empathizes. Sukham va yadi va dukkham sa yogi paramo. Krishna says, according to me, such a person is considered to be paramo yogi paramo mataha, to be a perfected yogi. Though just like we experience happiness and distress, such a person is able to see and understand how others would be undergoing happiness and distress. Let's read out the translation and the beautiful purport also. Somebody would like to read translation purport? Okay, Madam Medhavni, go ahead. Translation and the purport.
Translation. He is a perfect yogi who, by comparison to his own self, sees the true quality of all beings in both their happiness and their distress, O Arjuna. Purport. One who is Krishna conscious is a perfect yogi. He is aware of everyone's happiness and distress by dint of his own personal experience. The cause of the distress of a living entity is forgetfulness of his relationship with God. And the cause of happiness is knowing Krishna to be the supreme enjoyer of all the activities of the human being, the proprietor of all lands and planets, and the sincerest friend of all living entities. The perfect yogi knows that the living being who is conditioned with the modes of material nature is subjected to the threefold material miseries due to forgetfulness of his relationship with Krishna. And because one in Krishna consciousness is happy, he tries to distribute the knowledge of Krishna everywhere. Since the perfect yogi tries to broadcast the importance of being Krishna conscious, he is the best philanthropist in the world and he is the dearest servitor of the Lord. Nachatasman manusheshu kaschin me priyakritamaha, Bhagavad Gita 18.69. In other words, a devotee of the Lord always looks to the welfare of all living entities, and in this way, he is factually the friend of everyone. He is the best yogi because he does not desire perfection in yoga for his personal benefit, but tries for others also. He does not envy his fellow living entities. Here is a contrast between a pure devotee of the Lord and a yogi interested
Hare
only in his
Krishna.
personal. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, am I audible?
Here is a contrast between a pure devotee of the Lord and a yogi interested only in his personal elevation. The yogi who has withdrawn to a secluded place in order to meditate perfectly may not be as perfect as a devotee who is trying his best to turn every man toward Krishna consciousness. Baldev Vidyabhushan, on the commentary of this verse, makes a very beautiful point. So, what is being discussed here in terms of an empathy? So here the perfected yogi or true yogi is a devotee of the Lord. And what are the actions? And this is something which at the sadhaka stage we are supposed to cultivate according to our acharyas. So just like every individual desire happiness for oneself, similarly such a yogi or a devotee desire happiness for others, not distress. Because nobody is looking for distress. Similarly, he doesn't like to give distress to anyone. You're getting the point? As I want to be happy, he gives happiness and joy to others. So here, Baldev Vidyabhushan he writes that Lord Shri Krishna is saying, I consider this yogi who is merciful to all, seeing everyone's happiness and distress to be as his own. Though a person, he he is knowledgeable, he knows everything happens according to one's own karma. However, if such a person sees disparity, such a person sees disparity, Govinda. If such a person sees disparity and he sees like somebody is unequal to me, somebody is more fallen than I, somebody is non-devotee, etc., then Lord Shri Krishna says, according to Baldev Vidyabhushan is giving commentary, then such a person is not considered to be a best of the yogis. So who is a Vaishnava? That is what is being discussed here. So Prabhupada says, the yogi who has withdrawn to a secluded place in order to meditate perfectly may not be as perfect as a devotee who is trying his best to turn every man towards Krishna consciousness, because that is the highest happiness, like that. So that's the point is mentioned. Empathy. Just like everyone wants to be happy, similarly he wants to share that happiness with others, is being described. Now, after this being discussed, now comes turn for Arjuna to speak. And that's the discussion which begins. Text number 33. Arjuna here in this verse rejects Ashtanga Yoga. And he says, this is unendurable, this is impractical, it cannot be practiced. Why cannot practice? Because you're talking about samadrishti. How can I see Yudhishthira and Duryodhana as equal? From my vision, they're not equal. But how can I cultivate that? That's the verse. Arjuna vacha yoyam yogastaya prokta, by you, the path of yoga which has been described, samyena madhusudana etasyaham na pashyami I do not find it to be practical. Chanchalatva sthitam stiram. Why? Because the nature of the mind is very flickering. It's very difficult to practice this. Please read out the translation. Madharanjana, translation. Unmute yourself, or our admins can do it. Yes, go ahead.
Arjuna said, O Madhusudana, the system of yoga which you have summarized appears impractical and unendurable to me, for the mind is restless and unsteady.
And now Prabhupada gives the reasons why Ashtanga Yoga is impractical. So I'll just read out something from Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur's purport, and we'll read Prabhupada purport then. So Arjuna is saying this yoga practice is impractical. Why? The nature of mind is chanchal, is unsteady. So Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur writes, Arjuna is speaking to Krishna, that you spoke of seeing the happiness and distress of all living entities of the world as one's own happiness and distress. Previous verse. One can maintain such equal vision for friends or neutral persons, but it is not possible to maintain such equal vision for enemies, those who wish to cause you harm, for those who hate you or criticize you. It is not possible for me to see as equal at all times the happiness and distress of Yudhishthira and Duryodhana. Even if by intelligence you see equally the jiva, paramatma, prana, senses, bodily elements of oneself and one's enemies, that at max lasts for 2 to 3 days. I mean, that level of realization and understanding would not last forever. We have heard a lecture, we read something, and we feel like, Kartik month is about to start from tomorrow. And if in case you have heard Kartik Mahatmya and glories of Kartik, most of you might have taken a vow, this Kartik I take a vow for sure, I'm not going to eat any sweet. Generally, the vow doesn't last for more than a day. Somehow Krishna arranges on the very first day of Kartik month, you get some special Mahaprasad sweet or something, and then you forget that you ever taken a vow also. And after devouring the Mahaprasad, and later on you realize, oh, there was some vow that I took. When you go back to your room and you check your notes, what did I do today? So something like that is mentioning, even by intelligence, you're able to see that they are same, but this realization doesn't go beyond 2 to 3 days, because the mind is very strong than the discriminating intellect, more stronger than the intelligence. One sees that the mind attached to material enjoyment often overcomes the intelligence. That's the point here. Let's read out the purport. Please go to the third line onward of the purport, where Prabhupada says, first of all, it is not possible because ordinary person cannot leave home and go to a secluded place in the mountains to practice yoga. And then people are not serious. Very, very beautiful point Prabhupada writes in the purport. And then you will see how, read from here. People are not serious.
People are not serious about self-realization even by simple, practical means, and what to speak of his difficult yoga system, which regulates the mode of living, the manner of sitting, selection of place, and detachment of the mind from material engagements.
So what simple, practical yoga Prabhupada is saying that people are not even serious about that? Anyone familiar with such yoga? What is that simple, practical yoga? People are not serious about it. What to speak about going to the forest and living in seclusion? What is that simple, easy process, practical yoga? Are Bhakti yoga that Prabhupada has given. That is what Prabhupada is calling as a simple, easy, practical yoga. Okay, continue reading. Yes, go ahead, mother.
As a practical man, Arjuna thought it was impossible for this to follow this system of yoga, even though he was favorably endowed in many ways. He belonged to the royal family and was highly elevated in terms of numerous qualities. He was a great warrior. He had great longevity. And above all, he was the most intimate friend of Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. 5,000 years ago, Arjuna had much better facilities than we do now, yet he refused to accept the system of yoga. In fact, we do not find any record in history of his practicing it at any time. Therefore, this system must be considered generally impossible in this age of Kali. Of course, it may be possible for some very few rare men but for the people in general, it is an impossible proposal. If this were so 5,000 years ago, then what of the present day? Those who are imitating this yoga system in different so-called schools and societies, although complacent, are certainly wasting their time. They're completely in ignorance of the desired goal.
And now Arjuna says one of the very famous verses of this sixth chapter. Chanchalam hi manha Krishna brahmati ballavadradam tasyaham nigraham manye vayuriva sudushkramam. Chanchalam, flickering, my dear Lord. My mind is chanchalam. Pramati, agitated. Ballavad, very strong. Dradam, obstinate. Tasyaham nigraham manne. According to me, Vayur iva sudushkramam. It is easy to control the wind than to control this raging mind. Let's take a look at the presentation. I have something on that and we'll take the discussion. 1 second. Where is my presentation? So we go here. So controlling the mind. The golden question. Can Arjuna do it? Let's a little bit, I'll just quote something from Patanjali Yoga Sutras. I'll not go to the verses, but it is mentioned in Patanjali Yoga Sutras that actually Patanjali had compared mind to a monkey. Why? Because monkey is one creature, you might have seen plenty of it in Vrindavan if you visited. They're always restless, they're always disturbed, and they're often very difficult to control. They're always running from here to there. So there it is mentioned the nature of a particular monkey has been compared to a mind. And what is that? Imagine a monkey that had drunk a wine, means an intoxicated monkey who just drank wine. And then for that monkey, his tail has been tied to a pointed bush. All right, his tail has been tied to a pointed bush. They move their tail a lot. Has been tied to a pointed bush, and finally he's been put into a cage infested with venomous scorpions. Well, let's say not venomous, infested with scorpions, which begins to bite him. What a miserable condition! This refers to the state of mind, intoxicated with ahankar. I am something great. And then his tail is tied with a pointed bush, which means pricked by anger, which means always agitated due to so many desires for sense gratification. And when those desires doesn't get fulfilled, he becomes very angry. And then he's bitten. He's put into a cage where he's bitten by a scorpio, which means he's always surrounded by envious people, and he himself is envious of others' progress, bitten by envy. So my question is, do you know such a monkey? Anyone has met such a monkey? If in case you have met, please raise your hand. I'm not asking who is that monkey, but in case if you have ever come across such a monkey, you can raise your hand. All right. So precisely this is a situation of a person who has failed to bring his mind under control. That is what happens. And this is why in this chapter 6, the subject matter has been taken. Hare Krishna. Can we mute everyone? So we don't get distracted and disturbed by somebody unmuting themselves. So now let's take a look. Okay, where was I? I got distracted. Moving forward. So the golden question, controlling the mind. Can Arjuna do it? So Arjuna says, impossible, my dear Lord. Text number 33, that's what we read right now, right? It says, with the yoga that you have described is impractical, for the mind is restless and unsteady. So there's just a quick note of this very important verse, text number 33, which we just read before. This yoga is impractical and unendurable since mind is restless and steady. Which yoga? Ashtanga yoga is being talked about, not possible. Why impractical? First of all, characteristics of Kali Yuga. Prayan alpayusha sabya kalavasmin yuge janha. Manda sumanda matabhagya hi upadruta. Upadruta, always agitated. Like that, it is not possible. Our lifespan is very small, etc., etc. And on top of it, we are filled with so much fear and anxiety. Oh, roti kapda makan. Then Prabhupada mentions, look at Arjuna's capability. He was a man of a great strength and valor 5,000 years ago, where the situation was far much more favorable for practice Ashtanga Yoga. If he's saying no, what is possible? And then modern day yoga practices, Prabhupada says, modern day yoga practices are just like, you go to a market to buy a product. Let's you go and buy a cornflakes. They pack it very nicely. There's a nice packaging. You buy a product, you come back, but you realize there was only packaging, no content inside. So this is what is modern day yoga practice. They sell you a package with the high lofty promises, but there is no content inside, because the whole objective of yoga practice is missing like that. And then Arjuna says, Chanchalami Mana Krishna. So what it means, the nature of mind. Let's take a look. Chanchala means flickering. Flickering means always changing its position. And what it means by always changing its position means it raises doubt. Like Sankalpa Vikalpa. I'll do it, I'll not do it. And there could not be a better example than Arjuna. He was excited to fight. He only went to Krishna to ask for help of Krishna. And he only said to Krishna, become my charioteer. And now he only instructed Krishna, drive my chariot in the middle of the army. And now he's saying, no, I will not fight. This is what I mean by flickering of the mind. Raises doubts due to attachments. And then rationalizes attachments. That is again another point about flickering nature of the mind. Not only it raises doubts, just like what happened with Arjuna. This is Arjuna case study. And then he rationalized that, no, this is right. The second point about the nature of mind, which is described, is very obstinate and strong. Which means, oh, presentation is not going? What happened? Oh, presentation is not coming only. Oh, my camera is off. Oh, Hare Krishna. So I don't know since when you all not able to see the presentation. अपना आप बंद हो गया? ओए, किसने मेरा कैमरा बंद करा? Somebody must have switched off my camera. I don't know if that's possible. Okay. Obstinate, nature of mind. Pramati Ballabhadradam. Obstinate and strong. What is my obstinate and strong? Which means once mind decides, it is so difficult not to do it. Which means once it catches onto the attachment, you cannot get those thoughts out of your mind. How many of you agree with this? How many of you had that experience? It's just like almost impossible if the mind comes to that state. You just cannot get. And that's the time you're forced to act on it. And you're like, kyo kara maine? Why did I do it? I remember, anyways, I don't want to give a case study now. It'll take a lot of time, but let's move forward. Okay. And the other thing that is mentioned is, it's easier controlling a hurricane. What it means, the mind is so ruthless, or the uncontrolled mind is so ruthless, that it can make us act in the most selfish, egoistic, and ungrateful ways. And then we wonder, how can I do it? How can I speak like this? How can I act like this? In other words, it breaks down all walls and even does not ask any permission. And that is what is being described here. Now in the purport, Prabhupada writes something very interesting. Now, our acharyas are having a discussion. Oh, why Arjuna is so worried? Because in the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Lord Shri Krishna in the concluding verses, if you go back to 3rd chapter, let's take a look at verse. Just a little bit of technical discussion here. So at least, if you go to text number 30, go to text number 42, 3rd chapter, verse number 42. What Krishna says there? Indriyani parani ahur indriyebhya param manah manastastu para buddhir. Higher than the mind is intelligence. Yo buddhi paratastu sa, and higher than intelligence is you yourself as Atma. So the point is raised, hey, what's so difficult to control the mind? Higher than the mind is intelligence. So can't intelligence control the mind? Now that is being discussed in the purport. Now how intelligence, for example, let's take a case of Ajamil. Let me give you an example and then we'll take a look at the technical aspect. Now, Ajamil, he was born into a Brahmana family. From his childhood, he had heard scriptures, read scriptures, memorized scriptures, and so many shlokas. So when his eyes fell onto that prostitute, and when he saw that prostitute and, somehow got attracted to that sense object, then why his intelligence failed him? Now, there could be two possibilities. First, that his intelligence failed him. He did not remember anything. Or second, his mind overpowered intelligence. If I ask you in this way, again, a little bit technical discussion, either his intelligence failed him because he could not remember dhyayato vishyan pumsa sangas tesu pajayate or ye hi samspash jab hoga dukhiyuni evate. So many shlokas he could have remembered. So the one thing is his intelligence failed first. Or second option is the mind overpowered intelligence. So how many of you think, what do you think? What would happen? The first one, the intelligence failed. He did not remember anything. No shlokas. If he would have remembered those shlokas, his life would have been saved. Or instructions of his father. Or if he would remember that he's already married, he has a loving wife at home, then he could have been saved. Or how many of you say the second option, the mind overpowered intelligence? So that's a point, and that is a point Acharya has discussed at length, because scripture says intelligence is superior to mind, but it doesn't function like that. When mind, that's the reason it said, Pramati Ballabha Dhridam, when it clings to an attachment, then it breaks down all the walls. And let's take a look at Prabhupada's purport. Our Madhav Prabhu, your hand is up. So in the purport, you'll see there are verses quoted from Katha Upanishad. And in that next paragraph, you will see in the middle, intelligence is supposed to direct the mind. I want you to read from there. Go ahead, unmute yourself. Unmute. Go ahead.
Just waiting for the screen to come. Intelligence is supposed to direct the mind, but the mind is so strong and obstinate that it often overcomes even one's own intelligence, as an acute infection may surpass the efficacy of medicine. Such a strong mind is supposed to be controlled by the practice of yoga, but such practice is never practical for a worldly person like Arjuna. And what can we say of modern man? The simile used here is appropriate. One cannot capture the blowing wind, and it is even more difficult to capture the turbulent mind. The easiest way to control the mind, as suggested by Lord Chaitanya, chanting Hare Krishna, the great mantra for deliverance, in all humility. The method prescribed is Savai Mana Krishna Padara Vindo. One must engage one's mind fully in Krishna. Only then will there remain no other engagements to agitate the mind.
So, how many of you say, or how many of you kind of can make a note that there's very interesting discussion going on here? Although Krishna says intelligence is greater than the mind, but there is no discussion about controlling the intelligence. The discussion is in yoga practice all about controlling the mind. Yes or no? If intelligence is superior than the mind, if mind is supposed to be dictated by the intelligence, then the discussion in this chapter should have been how to purify the intelligence. But that's not the discussion at all. The discussion is about how to control the mind. So that is what the whole thing about it. The yoga practice, even in our case, the Bhakti yoga practice and Nishkam Karma yoga practice, that involves inherently that we need to practice mind and sense control. And then gradually intelligence would begin to function. Now, okay, let me ask this question. We can have a few minutes discussion on this to hear from all of you. We all are here from, practicing from different years, number of years. And maybe after that we can we can break for a break like that. How would you, in practical sense, now all of us agree on this thing that our mind is, at least we all have an experience. Lord Shri Krishna says, Bhagavad Gita is making a point, Arjuna is making a point. Mind is very, very strong. So what would you suggest? How do we deal with this very strong, obstinate mind? How can we fix it? Okay, one answer is, Prabhuji, I'm going to study scriptures for 2 hours every day from today, because of which my intelligence becomes purified, and that purified intelligence, being inspired by the instructions of Vedic scriptures, Guru Sadhu Shastra, I will direct my mind. Keep quiet, you rascal. Nothing doing. That is one way. Second way, well, I should not say second way. If I say the second way, you get a clue. I want you to think. What possible ways? What possible way? Okay, you may say, Prabhuji, chanting Hare Krishna, Cheto Darpanam Arjanam. Cheto Darpanam Arjanam. So we chant Hare Krishna, and then we'll be able to control our mind. That's another way. Okay. We all are doing all this. We know what's our level of control. Okay. So what possible options are there? What possible options are there? Okay, Mother Kamalika is saying dovetailing the senses. That is done. Okay, dovetailing the senses. Okay. You want to eat, very nice point. You want to eat nice food, then offer nice bhoga to the Lord, then honor. Wonderful point. So dovetailing is done. Okay, what else? What else? Okay, so we have a range of hands here. Why don't I start from the younger and then go to the eldest in terms of practice of Krishna consciousness, as I know. So let's start with Sani Prabhu. Let's hear from the younger generation and then we'll go up. Yes, Sani Prabhu.
Prabhuji, we must control our senses and train our mind in Krishna consciousness.
Are you reading a shloka or what?
No, Prabhuji.
Give me a practical output. Okay, I understand that. Train our mind in Krishna. That is okay. That's what we all are trying to do. Okay, good attempt, Sani Prabhu. Fine. Okay, Mother Kripapu, your hand is also up. Then I come to Maithini. Yes, Mother Kripapu.
Prabhuji, the only way I say it is keep yourself so much engaged that you do not think of any other activity.
Wonderful. Very nice. Very nice.
Conducive
Very nice.
to Krishna consciousness. Yeah.
That's a very valid point. It's good, worthy to note for everyone. Sani Prabhu also said the very nice point to train ourselves and Krishna consciousness. Mother Kripa was saying, keep yourself so busy, there's no time to think about sense gratifying. Good. Then we have Mother Maithini. What do you say?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dana Pranam. Prabhu, you had told in the previous class that Srila Prabhupada had mentioned that by subjugating the mind to the orders and instructions of our authority is the only way to mind control.
Okay, that is also true. Now that happens when we have affection for that authority. So that instruction of the authority can only function only when we are conscious in terms of if I disobey, which means if I don't follow what has been told to me, then I would break the heart. I would, disturb that devotee. And because I love that devotee, I don't want to cause inconvenience. So that's again a very valid point, but it takes a while. But it's a very valid point. Have us, develop that affection and affinity for the devotee, or maybe a lot of respect for that devotee, that we know that we don't want to be disrespectful. One way of disrespect is not following. So that is correct. Very good answer, Madhu Maithini. All right. Nitai Pran Prabhu, let's hear from you.
Prabhu, my take is similar to what others have said, that under the guidance of this seniors, we should always be engaged in the devotional service of the Lord, so that there is no time to have something else in our mind.
Yeah, but how many of you had an experience? Because all these years I also thought, let me keep myself 28 hours busy. Yet somehow when mind gets agitated, it finds 30 hours in a day, which means 2 hours for sense gratification. How many of you have that experience? Despite keeping busy out of 24 hours, still mind will find some time to enjoy sense gratification. Correct. I do agree, but I'm just sharing some practical issues here. Okay. We have good number of hands are coming up here. So it looks like I'm not the only one struggling. Everyone is struggling. Everyone is filled with realization what's going on. Okay, Mother Induradika, go up. What's your say?
I think we should be in the association of devotees. When we go on seeing them, I think in the association of devotees, we'll be able to control our mind.
Correct. Wonderful answer. Prabhupada had come down from the plane, and Prabhupada's servant was coming from behind. And suddenly Prabhupada turned to him and said, "Isn't she beautiful?" And the servant was holding the bag. And the Prabhupada said, "Isn't she beautiful?" He dropped the bag. He was panicking. So what had happened? He was coming behind Prabhupada, and the girl passed by, and he looked at 180 degree like this, and Prabhupada looked at him. So imagine somebody was so close to Prabhupada, even that person was somewhere else. So we have example of what is at our the servant of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was. Of course, he was tricked into it, magic show and all that. But okay, good point, good point. Okay. Venu Vadan Prabhuji, yes, go ahead. Unmute. Oh, unmute. Yes.
Yeah. Actually, this is also servicing, Prabhu. Servicing, if you are doing servicing everywhere, so always, so your mood will
You're
be
saying service.
service.
You sounded like car servicing. I thought you were saying
Mind servicing.
I thought servicing of the mind.
Mind servicing, body servicing.
Okay. So you're saying
Serving
be busy with service.
Serving the
Yes,
people, and
yes,
always
one.
in the that means book distribution or whatever it is there. If you are engaging in the service, so it will be there is no deviation. Always we are thinking of that one, how to improve or this thing like that.
Okay, what's the name of that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's assistant? Kerala. That happened, na? Nah, the name skipped. I hope all of you. He was serving Shri Chaitanya. Kala Krishna. He was serving Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Okay, now we come to Vaikuntapati Prabhu. Yes, Prabhuji.
I believe it is the real determination one should have. Should be given is the example is Jadabharata. Jadabharata lost his first life. Then when he became a deer, he remembered that, look, I allowed my mind to wander here and there, get attached, and because of that, I got into trouble. So he was extremely careful. And in the next birth as a Jadabharata, he kept himself away from all these things with a strong determination. Whenever the mind goes, he used to say, no, you have to be very strong on these points. So I should not allow my mind to go away. And if we analyze ourselves, we will know where our weak points are. And we will be able to spot those weak points and attack those weak points and improve on those weak points. This is what I...
Correct. Perfect answer. That's a key point. Unless we have a determination in place, it just cannot work. How much ever we are engaged in services, how much ever we are in association of pure devotees, how many of you have that experience? Just to further extend with the point that Prabhuji shared, which is the key point here. How many of you have experience when you went to sleep in the night and you told your mind, tomorrow morning, I'm getting up at 3 o'clock. I'm waking up at 3 o'clock. And how many of you say, I managed to get up? Have you had that experience where you have kind of, told your mind, I'm just waking up at 3 o'clock. Maybe you might have struggled for 15, 20 minutes, but you woke up. But imagine the other day when you went to sleep and you just went to sleep. And the alarm is ringing, starts ringing at 4 o'clock. Until 8 o'clock keeps ringing only. You've just not got out. Because that determination wasn't there. Correct. And that is why, thank you, Prabhuji, that's a key point. And therefore, Lord Shri Krishna begins the very first instruction of Bhagavad Gita with Mata Spasha Sukhanteya Shitoshna Sukadukada Agama Paino Nitya Stam Titsashva Bharata. One of the things that we need to tolerate is the urges, the demands of the mind. That is what I mean by yogi practice, or that's what I mean by yogi. Who is a yogi? Who can tolerate the urges. And of course, we are not following some one-sided path. It's not that we just have to tolerate. It's not about that also. But we are also provided with strength through the practice of Krishna consciousness. We are also given higher taste through a practice of Krishna consciousness, through our association. But this has to be there that I need to tolerate. Some things I need to tolerate. And as long as we can continue tolerating, fantastic. But if something really goes above our head, then it's a different thing that we need to sort it out. But tolerance has to be exercised. And that tolerance can only be exercised when we are determined to practice the path. That's the point. Okay, good. That sums our discussion here. If anyone else have any unique proposition, we can hear. Sunny and Mother Anjana, you want to add something to it?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes.
Hare
You have
Krishna.
something? Yeah, you want to add something to it?
Nothing else. I just want to say, whenever our mind, our powers, we need to analyze it. We need to do some SWOT analysis. Like
That generally happens after accident. that doesn't happen during the time of accident.
Sometimes we keep on speculating, like contemplating rather. We will do this, and it again starts just controlling our mind. Tomorrow morning I will get up, I will do this, I will do that, and maybe next morning we may just go under the control of our mind and senses, and we may do that wrong act, I may say. But if we do initially analyze the situation, what will happen? Maybe the role of intelligence is there, I don't know, or whatever Venkat.
Correct. This is also a good point. Therefore, it is quite a handy practice to maintain a diary.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Where we can write down our struggles, our challenges, our successes, and we can review it regularly. So we know that, because even if you do a SWOT analysis, it's quite possible after a week you'll forget about it. So there the writing helps. So okay, we'll take other inputs also. It's almost 1:23 at my watch now. I guess good time to take a break. So far, if we just to do a quick recap of what we have discussed and what's about to come now. So we just read further more things about Ashtanga Yoga. What is the vision of a perfected being? What are the steps, the first step and the last step? What is the vision? What are the activities? Like that we discussed. And then one of the aspect of his activities was he empathizes. And our Acharya says that should be cultivated in sadhaka stage. And finally, Arjuna started to speak from verse number 33. We discussed up to verse number 34 today, right now, at this point of time. Arjuna says, I cannot accept this. Because to see, with the equal vision, person of a nature like the envious person like Duryodhan and a kind-hearted person like Yudhishthira Maharaj on the same level, it is not possible for me. Why? The mind is too chanchala, flickering. Why flickering? Because the moment I bring them together, it will go back reminding me of what all this Duryodhan did to me. And then it will go back thinking about what all Yudhishthira Maharaj did to me, and they would never match. So at max, intellectually, I can pacify myself, but for 2-3 days. But mind will not accept it nonetheless. And then he speaks in 34th verse, the nature of the mind, flickering, adamant, strong, obstinate, like that. And it is easy to control the wind, one of the last point, which means it can break all the walls. It is shameless, can make us act shamelessly. So here we were discussing about what would be our way of dealing with it. And there we made a point, intelligence cannot control the mind in our stage. Often mind overshadows intelligence. So what are the ways we can deal with it? And all of you said wonderful answers. But it all begins with making a determination that I want to do it. Unless that is a primary step, nothing else will follow. So that was our discussion conclusion so far. We'll see what Lord Shri Krishna says. And after that, Arjuna, hearing that answer, is still frightened and worried. Then he say, my dear Lord, I'm really worried about those people who take to this path and they end up in a no man's land. Because when they take to spiritual practice, they have to give up material pleasures. But now if they're not successful in spiritual life, it's just like you don't reach anywhere. You end up between India and Pakistan border. You become a tree there probably, in no man's land. So I'm just joking. So what happens? And then Lord Shri Krishna gives some very profound, very, very, I would say, very encouraging words Lord Shri Krishna speaks. That would be our second part of discussion, post-break as we meet. So now is 1:25. We catch up again in 10 minutes. 1:35 we'll meet. Thank you all for your kind attention. Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Guru Vaishnavangscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathannitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sagana Lalita Sri Visakhanda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda, Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda, Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda, Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Juta Padakamalam Sri Guru Vaishnavangscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathan Tang Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sagana Lalita Sri Visakhanikam
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So, moving forward with our discussion. Just one quick second. So, how to control the mind? 6th chapter, verse number 35. What does Lord Shri Krishna says? Let's take a look at it. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Asamshayam Mahabhavu Mano Durnigraham Chalam Abhyasena tu Kanteya Vairagena Chagrihate. So interestingly, Lord says Asamshayam, without a doubt, Mahabhahu. Krishna is encouraging Arjuna actually. Why he could have said Asamshayam Kanteya? Bharata. Why did Krishna said Mahabhava? It's a very interesting note. Do not lose hope, Arjuna. You are a mighty warrior. What is impossible for you? Like that, and encouraging what has been spoken, Mahabhava. Then there is an affirmation. Asamshayam, without doubt, Mano Durnigraham Chalam. Yes, it is indeed correct. Very, very difficult to control the mind. But there is a way out. What is a way out? There is a two-step formula. What is a formula to control the mind? Abhyasena. Krishna says by abhyas, by practice, the suitable practice. This is nothing but yama and niyama, which means niyama, follow the prescription, which means 4 regular principles, chanting the holy names of the Lord, like all that all of you said, be in the association, engage in seva, etc., etc. Those are the do's, and which kind of can be summed up in the 9 processes of bhakti: Shavanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Pada, Sevanam, like that. Then Abhyasena tu Kanteya Vairagya Chagrihate. Vairagyena Chagrihate. So the second step is detachment. Detachment from what? These are the things that we should give up. So like some of you were making a point, we should have good association. Good association is effective as long as we don't have bad association. The very important point. Therefore, these 2 points goes together. So you can't just say I have to have a good association, which is correct, but we should also not have bad association. So the don'ts, detachment means to give up all those things which are detrimental for one's Krishna consciousness. And the do's, practice, accept all those which are applicable or favorable for our Krishna consciousness. Like that, the discussion is being done. Okay, let's take a look. Very beautiful purport by Srila Prabhupada. Let's go to the purport now. So if you look at the purport, Prabhupada talks about in the 3rd line, what is this practice, suitable practice? The Prabhupada says in the 3rd line, in the present age, no one can observe the strict rules and regulations of placing oneself in a sacred place, focusing the mind on the super soul, restraining the senses. It means Ashtanga Yoga is not possible. So what is a suitable practice? Prabhupada says, by the practice of Krishna consciousness, however, one can engage in 9 types of devotional service to the Lord. Like that Prabhupada mentioned. Then he explains Vairagya. Let's focus at the end of the purport. The 7th or the 8th, the last line, you see Prabhupada that similarly, by discharge of devotional service. Sunny Prabhu, if you have found it, please read from there. Go ahead.
Similarly, by discharge of devotional service, one feels transcendental satisfaction as the mind becomes detached from material objectives. It is something like curing a disease by expert treatment and appropriate diet. Hearing of the transcendental activities of Lord Krishna is therefore expert treatment for the mad mind, and eating the foodstuffs offered to Krishna is the appropriate diet for the suffering patient. This treatment is the process of Krishna consciousness. Hare Krishna.
So like that, the practice of Krishna consciousness is the treatment for this crazy mind in one sense. Let's go to the next verse where Lord Shri Krishna again speaks about the importance of mind control. Asamshayatatmana yogo dushprapa iti me matihi vashatatmana tu yatata shakyo avaptum upayatah. So asamshayatatmana yogo. Asamshayata means, which is already disturbed. Not sayam means control. Asayam means unbridled, which is already raging like that. For one whose mind is uncontrolled, dushprapa iti me matihi. Mati means my opinion. Dushprapa means very difficult to obtain, which means the success on the yoga path. Clear? Vash atmana tu yatata. Vashi atmana, the one who has learned to control. Shakyo avaptum upayataha. For him to achieve the success in the path of yoga is possible. Please read the translation, Madharanjana. You can unmute. Go ahead.
For one whose mind is unbridled, self-realization is difficult work. But he whose mind is controlled and who strives by appropriate means is assured of success. This is my opinion.
Prabhupada writes in the purport, trying to practice yoga while engaging the mind in practical enjoyment is like trying to ignite a fire while pouring a water on it. Trying to ignite a fire means of Krishna consciousness. But while practicing yoga, still engaging in sinful activities or sense enjoyment is just like pouring the water on that fire which you're trying to ignite of spiritual life. And now we come to the last section where Arjuna begins to speak. But before we go to that, just want to have a little bit more interaction on the subject matter of mind control. Although I would have preferred to have it as a group activity, but being this online forum entirely, that won't be possible. But maybe all of us can reflect on it for a second, if possible. So, Krishna advises Arjuna to regulate his mind and senses in order to experience true freedom. So, here is my question to you. Does the idea of controlling your own mind and senses strike you as frightening or empowering? So why I'm raising this question? The question is, to be a yogi, we need to control our mind. So what it takes to become a yogi in the modern world is what I'm about to discuss now. To be a yogi in Kali Yuga, in the modern world, living in a city, we are completely bombarded with unlimited allurements and temptations. What it takes to become a yogi in the modern world. For that, I'm going to ask this in 2 parts. This is the first part of question. So again, I'll repeat, the idea of controlling the mind and senses, does it strike you as frightening or empowering? What do you say? For example, controlling the mind. Oh, if my mind wants to watch, let's say Bahubali 3 or whatever, some movie. No, you're not supposed to watch a movie. You are a sadhu. You are a yogi. So does it frightens you, or does that wish of controlling the mind empowers you? You feel like, yes, I can do it. Are you getting the point? Okay, if still not sure, let me ask this question to all of you. How many of you agree, while living in this modern day, in the world today, our mind and senses are constantly constantly bombarded with allurements and temptations? It's like an everyday battle we all have to face. We all agree with that? If yes, so now this is a question which I'm trying to ask to all of you. So, how many of you find it empowering? If it is empowering, I saw our Madhav Kripa Prabhu saying empowering. So, please enlighten why you say it's empowering. Go ahead, Madhav Kripa Prabhu.
Prabhuji, the ability to say no to things which are not conducive to our emotional lifestyle is something very empowering. Often it happens that we give in to our mind and senses, but one who can say no to them and very convincingly without falling, to them, definitely it's an empowering feeling, because we are that kinds of shows the strong determination which we are having, and also it also gives you a sense of relief that you will not fall prey to such allurements in the coming days.
In the next exam, surprise test by Krishna. Okay, very good. I just want to add one more thing to Madhav Kripa Prabhu was saying. Okay, I'll not add. Let's hear from students, and then I'll make a point afterwards. Yes, Mother Medhavani, what's your take? Go ahead, Mother.
Hare Krishna. So, Prabhuji, it is empowering
Little
when
louder,
we are able.
please.
Hare Krishna. Am I audible? Haribol? Okay. So,
Go ahead.
I felt that it is both ways. Whenever I'm able to, what was I saying? Oh, I lost my. Yeah. So whenever I'm able to say a no or a yes according to what is right, or let me say a good dog and a bad dog, right? So whenever I'm able to feed the good dog, then I feel empowered, and when I feed the bad dog, then I feel frightened. So it's both ways. I've never felt one way or the other all the time. So it depends on which dog I've fed, what kind of decision I've taken.
Correct. My dogs are a little confused what happened. So not really sure.
Have I not? Am I not clear? What I said?
Yeah, not exactly. Let me reiterate my question. I'll come back to you this thing. My question is, does the idea of controlling your own mind, when it is a question of feeding a good dog, there is no question of controlling the mind then. It's not that you're going to say, okay, I'm not going to change 16 rounds today. Oh, I'm not going to change 24 rounds today. My mind wants to change 24 rounds, so I want to control. So there's no question of about the good dog. The question is about dealing with the bad dog. So right now, okay, let's not go to good dog and bad dog analogy. It makes it complicated. Simple question. Does the idea of controlling your own mind and senses, does it strike as frightening or empowering? That's my question. Yes, Nitai Pranpu, let's hear from you.
Prabhu, it's a sense of enlightenment. Reason being the fact that if we control our mind and senses, even though the condition are quite worse, not in a favor, but it's give the sense of enlightenment. While if he fails, that's give the sense of guilty, and that's get us into a far more worse condition. So it's always better that we should control our mind and senses to always be in a sense of enlightenment.
Okay. Let's hear from who has not yet. Anshul Prabhu, go ahead. I haven't heard you. Go ahead, share. What's your thought?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dhanad Pram. So Prabhuji, it is like later in the 17th, 18th chapter, Krishna tells about Satvik Sukh, Rajsik Sukh, and Tamsik Sukh. So Satvik Sukh, he says that in the short term it might seem like a poison, but in long term it's kind of it brings happiness. So if we control our mind and senses, in the short term it might seem frightening or maybe difficult or a fear of missing out. But in the long term, it in the hindsight, it feels that we did the right thing. Whereas if we let our mind, like don't control our mind and senses, it might lead to a Rajsik Sukh or a Tamsik Sukh, which in the short term might feel good, but in the long term, like Prabhuji just said, might lead to a feeling of guilt or something like that.
Okay, thank you. Here is my take on this question. It is frightening for those who don't know the result, what they will get when they try to control their mind and senses, because the result is not clear and they're like, oh, how would I deal with it? I would have to literally give up on what my mind wants, And it's empowering for those, again, once again, who are very clear with the objective for what reason they're practicing yoga. For example, we would have an experience for all of us, let's say, taking vows, therefore it's very important, significant. Kartik month starts from tomorrow, and the taking vows is very important. The idea of taking vow, of course, we're not supposed to take a vow like, chanting 64 rounds every day. Now, it has to be practical. It should not be impractical. The practical could be, okay, I chant 16 rounds, maybe I'll chant 2 more rounds every day. Now, when you do it, you get a confidence that now I can chant 20 rounds every day. So that is how it becomes empowering. Only if you are able to follow through it. And of course, as I said, the knowledge is the background of whole thing. Frightening for those who are not sure what goal for which they want to control it, and empowering for those who are very clear with the goal or the objective of the practice. Vaikuntapati Prabhu, please go ahead. Unmute. Yes, Prabhu.
Prabhu, the experience is this, when you control your mind and the mind listens to you, then it's a tremendous sense of satisfaction.
Yeah. Correct.
Because you know exactly what you want and you want it, and you are not getting wavered by anything else. The satisfaction is, that has to be experienced.
Correct. So again, the subject matter of knowledge and baby step as we take, we really feel, if you have taken a vow and if you have been through with that vow,
yes,
we feel like, yes, there is a sense of empowerment. And that is what Prabhuji is saying, that you have to experience it. So please don't take vows which are impractical. First thing is that you will be frightened to chant 60 hours also next time onwards. Okay, so my theme of thought here right now, my theme of discussion right now, we're just extending this idea on mind control, what it means to be a yogi in the modern world. So first thing is we have to practice mind control as unavoidable like that. Let's take to the second part of the question here now. And the second part of the question is, this is a little personal. This is personal. Huh? What challenges do you face in following the instructions of the Lord on the subject matter of controlling the mind, such as mantra meditation? What are my challenges? For example, Srila Prabhupada said, if you say you are a part of ISKCON family, there should be a 4:30 Mangalati program, right? That's what he said to his case Burijan Prabhu back in Japan, like that. And of course, that was at that point of time. I'm just repeating, but things could accordingly be there. So on the subject of controlling the mind, my office life, professional life is all okay. It all ends on time. But somehow I keep dragging my feet till late in the night, maybe up to midnight. And because I've slept at midnight, how can I wake up early? Then I drag my chanting all through the day. So it's all because of what? It's a game of the mind, Second thing, eating Krishna Prasadam. Oh, once in a while when I cross Lonavala. And then I see those big billboards, Lonavala Chikki Wale. So then I feel, what's the big problem? Once in a while, Vishnu on the fly. We can grab something. Anyways, that's okay. So how many of us struggle with that? And maybe attending regular Sangha programs. I'm so tired. My work life has become so hectic. Oh, I haven't taken a break. Let me go for a vacation with kids, etc., etc. So this is something that are the practical challenges for us to think about. And the reason I raise this question, because we also Krishna spoke about regulations. Yuktahara viharasya. And to live a regulated life involves mind control. You cannot have a regulated life without having a certain amount of mind control. That was the whole discussion. Fine. We'll move forward here. This is for all of you to think. What happens next? Next is Arjuna pondered. He is little scared because controlling mind is an effort that requires determination, as we discussed before. Thus he thought, what happens if one faithfully takes to this yogic process, but later falls down or falls away without perfecting his spiritual consciousness? Would such a person be left in a no man's land, which means having failed to attain success on the spiritual path? The spiritual journey can be compared to a high-hanging fruits. And the material life, the success in material life can be compared to a low-hanging fruit, which means the material life promises you immediate pleasures. and spiritual life promises you in future. Satchitananda in future. Gradual development, gradual purification. So that Ananda, that of course we do get reciprocation even in our practice also. But the point here is immediate pleasures are not there in that sense. That could be mode of goodness, whatnot. Those are details into it. So would such a person be in no man's land, having failed to attain spiritual satisfaction, and simultaneously he has squandered his opportunity for worldly pleasures? And this is what is the question that Arjuna has in mind. And now, what does Arjuna says? Verse number 37 and 38. Arjuna said, "O Krishna, what is the destination of unsuccessful transcendentalists who in the beginning takes to the process of self-realization with faith, but who later desist due to worldly mindedness and thus does not attain perfection in mysticism? Does he fall away from both spiritual and material success?" Just like Srila Prabhupada was asked by a reporter, "Swamiji, what if you find out at the end of your life Krishna does not exist?" Prabhupada said, "Fantastic. Our Krishna conscious practice or Krishna conscious life only is so wonderful. Even if Krishna does not exist, we are living a wonderful life. All devotees are so blissful. And if Krishna exists, we have a beautiful life and we have a fantastic opportunity. What about you? Now, if Krishna exists for you, of course, that's an extended discussion, but that's very obvious. Now, in your case, which Prabhupada meant, you're living a miserable life. And in the end of the life, you found out Krishna exists in the form of a Yamdutas and Yamraja's abode, then you miss out an opportunity. So, question here, what happens? So, why is Arjuna asking this question? Lord Shri Krishna in 2nd chapter, verse number 14, Neha Bikramo Nashasti Pratyavayo Navidyate. He has already, Lord Shri Krishna have already given that affirmation that Arjuna, anyone, Neha Bikramo Nashasti Pratyavayo Navidyate Swalpamasya Dharmasya, Swalpa Trayate Mahatavyat. I will protect him from the greatest danger. So if already Krishna has spoken like this, Arjuna heard it also. Why Arjuna is asking? Now, because now recently the discussion that happened between Arjuna and Krishna was largely of Jnana Yoga and Ashtanga Yoga, which he found was to be very difficult, particularly Ashtanga Yoga. And understanding the nature of the man in this world, Arjuna is saying it is not possible for anyone to really get success into it. Why? Two reasons. First of all, one may not be sufficiently serious about the process itself. Therefore, success is not guaranteed for that person in this lifetime. And the second problem is, even after constant endeavor, there is a possibility one may deviate during the process itself, because to Prabhupada, because to to practice or pursue the transcendental path is more or less to declare the war on the illusory energy with Maya. The bhakta is in a constant war with Maya, the material energy. So a little inattention, we can be brutally hurt. That is a point which is being discussed. Let's take a look at the verses now. So 37 and 38, we have already read the translation. This is what the summary. Very beautiful purpose, but we'll go from text number 39. In text number 39, Arjuna says, Etan me samshayam Krishna. This is my doubt to you, my dear Lord. Chetum arhasi yasheshataha. Kindly, you are requested to kindly clear my doubt. Tvad anya samshayasyasya. Apart from you, there is no one who can clear my doubt. Chetanahi upapadyate. In other words, apart from you, there is no one to be found who can clear my doubt. So, very beautiful purport. Prabhupada says, why Krishna only? Why Arjuna is saying, Krishna, you only can clarify my doubt. And the whole purport is dedicated to glorifying Krishna. Who is Krishna for that reason? Madharati Manjari, please go ahead and read the purport. Text number 39. Unmute.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Purport of text 39. Krishna is the perfect knower of past, present, and future. In the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord said that all living entities existed individually in the past, they exist now in the present, and they continue to retain individual identity in the future, even after liberation from the material entanglement. So he has already cleared up the question of the future of the individual living entity. Now, Arjuna wants to know of the future of the unsuccessful transcendentalist. No one is equal to or above Krishna, and certainly the so-called great sages and philosophers who are at the mercy of material nature cannot equal him. Therefore, the verdict of Krishna is the final and complete answer to all doubts, because he knows past, present, and future perfectly, but no one knows him. Krishna and Krishna conscious devotees alone can know what is what. Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Text number 40, where Lord Shri Krishna says, there's no loss. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, Parthanaiveha na mutra vinashastasya vidyate, tasya vidyate. You should know, Arjuna, there is no loss. Nahi kalyana krit kashit. So, kalyana krit, who's engaged in this auspicious path, kashit, at any time, durgatim tata gachati, he will never ever get a durgati. Durgati tata gachati. Tata means my friend, tata means my son. It can mean interchangeable like that. So the Lord said, Mother Induratika, please read out the translation.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Son of Pritha, a transcendentalist engaged in auspicious activities, does not meet with destruction either in this world or in the spiritual world. One who does good, my friend, is never overcome by evil.
Very, very beautiful purport. Prabhupada begins the purport with quoting the very famous shloka from the first canto. Tyaktva sadharmam charanambhujam harer. Tyaktva means giving up. Tyaktva sadharmam, swadharmam refers to varnashrama. Tyaktva sadharmam charanambhujam harer. Who has given up on everything and done what? He has taken to the shelter, charanambhujam harer, of the lotus feet of the Lord Hari. Bhajan apakvota pate tato yadi. Tato yadi. If for such a person, bhajan apakva, his bhajan has not matured, before maturity of his devotional practice, patet tato. Patet matlab, he falls down. Yatra kava bhadram abhud amushyakim. Now Advin raises the question, so what's the loss? Yatra kava abhadram. Abhadram means inauspicious. So what inauspicious can happen to him? Kovartha apto abhajatam sudharmataha. And what good a person who is not engaged in bhakti, although practicing swadharmata, although practicing his varnashram principles very carefully, intelligently, what gain can he attain? And one who has given up everything to accept the lotus feet of the Lord, what loss can he ever receive in his path, even he has fallen down from his process? So 5 to 6 lines below in the purport, you'll see one may argue that by Krishna consciousness. Mother Vasha, if you can see that, you go ahead and read.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranams.
Danvas, yes.
One may argue that by Krishna consciousness, one may attain the highest perfection if it is completed. But if one does not attain such a perfection stage, then he loses both materially and spiritually. It is enjoined in the scriptures that one has to suffer the reaction of not executing prescribed duties. Therefore, one who fails to discharge transcendental activities properly becomes subjected to these reactions. The Bhagavatam assures this unsuccessful transcendentalist that there need be no worries. Even though he may be subjected to the reaction for not perfectly executing prescribed duties, he is still not a loser, because auspicious Krishna consciousness is never forgotten, and one so engaged will continue to be so even if he is low-born in the next life.
All right. Now read the next paragraph. Very important. The purport may be understood as follows. Humanity divided into 2 sections, regulated, non-regulated. Where is it? Yeah, read from the second end. Those who are engaged.
Those who are engaged simply in bestow a sense gratification without the knowledge of their next life or spiritual salvation belong to the non-regulated section, and those who follow the principle of prescribed duties in the scripture are classified amongst the regulated section. The non-regulated section, both civilized and non-civilized, educated and non-educated, strong and weak, are full of animal propensities. Their activities are never auspicious because while enjoying the animal propensity of eating, sleeping, defending, and mating, they are perpetually remain in material existence, which is always miserable. On the other hand, those who are regulated by scriptural injunction and who thus rise gradually to Krishna consciousness certainly progress in life.
So regulated and non-regulated, these are the two sections of human society. Non-regulated, who does not know the purpose of life, who do not follow scriptural injunctions. And that non-regulated purpose is there could be civilized, uncivilized, educated, uneducated. So regardless of that, civilized, uncivilized, educated, uneducated, all of them are full of animalistic propensities. So you understand to whom Prabhupada is addressing this. Okay. All right. And the Prabhupada goes on. Now, those who are following the path of auspiciousness, which means they're regulated, in the next paragraph, they are divided into three sections. One, karmakandis, those who follow scriptural rules and regulations for enjoyment. Those who are trying to find ultimate liberation from material existence. You can call them as, a spiritualist in one sense. And third, those who are devotees in Krishna consciousness can be called as transcendentalists, bhaktas. So those who are following rules and regulations, scriptures for material happiness may be further divided into two classes. First, those who are fruity workers and those who desire no fruit from sense gratification. So now this could be karmakandis and maybe sakam karma yoga nishkam karma like that. Prabhupada goes on building up that purport like that. Fine. So ultimately the best is Krishna consciousness. And the point made is if anyone is taken to this auspicious path of Krishna consciousness, there is never ever a case of any loss possible. Okay, let's move forward. Text number 41. Now what if a person have got deviated or he has fallen down from his practice? Prapya punya kritam lokan ushchitva shashvati samaha. So in this verse, Krishna says, those who have got distracted and left the practice after practicing for a short while. Not that they left it and came back. No, that's not. They've left it. They're not doing it anymore. They practiced for a short while. Prapya punya kritam lokan. So they'll go to the kritam lokan. They'll go to the lokas which are attained by prapya punya, which are attained by the pious souls. They'll go to that loka, heavenly planets. Ushitva shashvati samaha. And then Ushitva shashvati samaha, they would dwell in those planets for years together. And then what happens? Suchinam Shrimatam Gehe Yogo Bhrashto Vijiyate. And then they'll come down again and take a birth in the house of a Suchinam Shrimatam Gehe. Gehe is the house of the pious souls. Translation, please. Madan Radhika, go ahead. Translation.
The unsuccessful yogi, after many years of enjoyment on the planets of the pious living entities, is born into a family of righteous people or into a family of rich aristocracy.
Okay. Prabhupada writes in the next paragraph in the purport. Please read the second paragraph of the purport. Beautiful point. The real purpose of yoga practice.
The real purpose of yoga practice is to achieve the highest perfection of Krishna consciousness, as explained in the last verse of this chapter. But those who do not persevere to such an extent and who fail because of material allurements are allowed, by the grace of Lord, to make full utilization of their material propensities. And after that, they are given opportunities to live prosperous lives in righteous or aristocratic families. Those who are born in such families may take advantage of the facilities and try to elevate themselves to full Krishna consciousness.
Thank you. Now, text number 42. What happens to those who, after long practice, have got deviated? अथवा योगिनाम eva kule bhavati dhimatam. So those yogis, after long practice of yoga, etadhi durlabhataram loke janmayat idrisham. They take their birth in this world, which is said to be dullabhataram, very rare. And what is a rare birth? They take birth in the house of Kule Bhavati Dhimatam, of the house of Dhimatam. You can call it as one way transcendentalist, or Dhimatam can also refer to pure devotee of the Lord, or the pure devotee or devotee of the Lord, like that. So if unsuccessful after long practice of yoga, he takes his birth in a family of transcendentalists who are surely great in wisdom. And such a birth is Dulla Bhataram. Prabhupada writes a beautiful purport. Anshul Prabhu, read the purport, please. And Prabhupada says that how the birth in the families of great yogis or spiritualists or acharyas, families of Goswamis and acharyas considered so auspicious. And then Prabhupada gives, I was fortunate enough to take birth like this, like that. Please go ahead, read the purport.
Birth in a family of yogis or transcendentalists, those with great wisdom, is praised herein because the child born in such a family receives a spiritual impetus from the very beginning of his life. It is especially the case in the acharyas or Goswami families. Such families are very learned and devoted by tradition and training, and thus they become spiritual masters. In India, there are many such acharya families, but they have now degenerated due to insufficient education and training. By the grace of the Lord, there are still families that foster transcendentalists generation after generation. It is certainly very fortunate to take birth in such families. Fortunately, both are spiritual masters, Om Vishnupad Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, and our humble self had the opportunity to take birth in such families. By the grace of the Lord, and both of us were trained in the devotional service of the Lord from the very beginning of our lives. Later on, we met the order of the transcendental system.
Which means by the divine arrangement of the Lord. Very, very beautiful purport, sweet purport, like that Prabhupada says. So many where you might have read and heard Prabhupada, particularly Prabhupada said, those who are born within this movement, which means to Prabhupada disciples and grand disciples, which means to all the congregation of our ISKCON practicing devotees, the kids born to them are not ordinary. Prabhupada said, take care of them. And some of the letters written to congregation disciples of Prabhupada said to mothers, treat your child as a deity. Take care of them, particularly when they're young. They need all your care and attention like that. So what's the advantage of it? What happens? Text number 43 and 44 talks about it. Because they have taken a birth either in the pious families or in the house of Dhimatam, it's but natural. It's very easy for them to revive their Krishna consciousness. Tatratam buddhi samyogam labate pauravadehikam yatate cha tato bhuya samsiddho kurunandana. On taking such birth, he revives the divine consciousness of his previous life and he again tries to make further progress in order to achieve complete success. And Prabhupada writes an example of Bharat Maharaj. Text number 44. Purva abhyasena teneva hriyate hi avashopi sa jigyasurapi yogasya shabda brahmati vartate. Very beautiful points mentioned here. Purva abhyasane te neva. So Purva abhyasana means practice from the previous life. What happens? Hriyate hi avasho pisa. Because somebody who have practiced devotional life in previous life, in this life, such a person would naturally be attracted to the Lord, would naturally be attracted to devotional practice. Jigyasu api yogasya, would be inquisitive about yoga, which means about Lord. Yoga practice about Lord, who am I and all that. Shabda brahmati vartate. And such a person, Shabda brahmati vartate, would not get caught up with the mundane understanding of, what is that? Dharma, artha, kamo, purushartha. But rather he will transcend that and his focus will be on developing the relationship with the Supreme Lord. So here, a very beautiful example Prabhupada gives in the puppet of Sri Chaitanya, of Haridas Thakur. So let's take a translation. So I hope this is clear. Maybe I can read out the translation. By virtue of the divine consciousness of the previous life, he automatically becomes attracted to the yogi principle, even without seeking them. Such an inquisitive transcendentalist stands always above the ritualistic principles of the scripture. Hare Krishna. And what's the point here? Prabhupada quotes the verse. Prabhupada quotes the famous shloka from third canto. It is mentioned, Aho batashva pachato garyam yachiva gareva tate namatubhyam tepos tapaste juhu shashnurarya brahmanacharnamagrananti ete. Now, why this shloka has been quoted here? In this shloka, it is mentioned that somebody who is chanting Hare Krishna must have performed, he must have taken bath in all the sacred rivers, he must have performed all the tapasyas, he must have done all the yagyas, things like that. Oh my Lord, this is spoken by Mother Dehuti. Persons who chant the holy names of your Lordship are far, far advanced in spiritual life, even if born in families of Shwapachaha, dog eaters. Such chanters have undoubtedly performed all kinds of austerities and sacrifices, bathed in all sacred places, and finished all scriptural studies. In Padyavali, Srila Rupa Goswami writes a very interesting verse where he says that Brahmaji, Shivji, and many other devtas are standing at the door of that person with the arti paraphernalia to do the arti of that person, who has even thought that in future sometimes I should chant Hare Krishna. Like that, Rupa Goswami mentions about it. So such is the glories of a person who is able to take to the process of chanting. And then Prabhupada gives an example of Srila Haridas Thakur. Madan Mohan Mohini Mataji, please read the second paragraph from the puppet.
The famous example of this was presented by Lord Chaitanya, who accepted Thakur Haridas as one of his most important disciples. Although Thakur Haridas happened to take his birth in a Muslim family, he was elevated to the post of Namacharya by Lord Chaitanya due to his rigidly attended principles of chanting 300,000 holy names of the Lord daily. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And because he chanted the holy name of the Lord constantly, it is understood that in his previous life, he must have passed through all the ritualistic methods of the Vedas known as Shabda Brahma. Unless, therefore, one is purified, one cannot take to the principles of Krishna consciousness or become engaged in chanting the holy name of the Lord, Hare Krishna.
Please read the translation for 45th verse.
And when the yogi engages himself with sincere endeavor in making further progress, being washed of all contaminations, then ultimately achieving perfections after many, many births of practice, he attains the supreme goal.
Now Lord Shri Krishna is concluding his discussion. So in 46th verse, he tells Arjuna, Arjuna, in all circumstances, be a yogi. And he says, please go ahead and read the translation of verse number 46.
A yogi is greater than the ascetic, greater than the empiricist, and greater than the fruitive worker. Therefore, O Arjuna, in all circumstances, be a yogi.
And now Prabhupada gives a summary of yoga ladder in the puppet. So I would request all of you to read it out at your leisure because as almost time is up, we'll come to the last and the concluding verse. So you can mark it down, this puppet, as a summary, where Prabhupada gives a summary of the whole yoga ladder. Text number 47, be a yogi. Now Arjuna may wonder, which yogi, my dear Lord? Karma yogi, Jnana yogi, Hatha yogi, Bhakti yogi, which yogi? And Lord Shri Krishna gives his conclusion. Yoginam api sarvesham. Who is the best of the yogi? Madgatena antaratmana. Madgatena antaratmana. Who is always abiding in me, which means who is always thinking about me. Shraddhavan bhajate yomam. Very important thing. How does he bhaj? How does he worships? With Shraddha. He renders service to me with faith. Same yuktatamo mataha. Same, according to me, yuktatamaha mataha. Mataha means according to my opinion. According to me, such a person is considered to be the greatest yogi. A very, very beautiful puppet. So Prabhupada's purport here, the first part of the purport focuses on Shraddhavan Bhajate Yama. What is the difference between bhajan or bhajate and worship? Prabhupada says bhajate does not mean worship. Now worship means worship, let's say a big politician is coming. You know, you would have, somebody may have who's a chaplus, for example, or maybe if you have some interest from him, you know, such person would receive him very well. In other words, it's called as worship. Worship means showing one's awe and reverence. That is called as worship. But Prabhupada says that is not bhajate. The word bhajate can only be used or is only used in context of Lord Krishna. Now you can worship Ganeshi, you can worship Durga, you can worship Shiva. We don't worship, we serve Krishna. Generally it is not mentioned we are serving Shiva, we are serving Ganeshi. That is never the discussion that comes. So there is a difference between bhajate and worship. That is what Prabhupada establishes, like that. So bhajate and worship, that's what is being mentioned in the first two paragraphs, like that. Oh, 1 second, please. And then in the follow paragraph, then Prabhupada once again, 1 second, what's going on here? Then in the follow paragraph, Prabhupada again talks about the yoga ladder, like this. And then finally Prabhupada concludes with, who is the ideal yogi? The ideal yogi is one who concentrates his attention on Krishna. Maybe we can read this paragraph. This is a very nice paragraph which sums up the yoga ladder. First, second, third. The fourth paragraph you will see, Mother Satya, the culmination of all kinds of yoga practices. If you have found it, unmute please. Yes, please read out that paragraph. And before you start reading the paragraph, so I would request our admins, Mother Medhavani, please, or Harinam Krishna Prabhu, kindly note down the attendance, who all are present at this point of time. And then who are not present at this point of time, let me know, you mark them absent. Second, take a screenshot quickly. Whoever has camera off, mark them absent, unless those who have taken permission. Okay, so I see only half of them have their cameras on. So take a screenshot, and at this point of time, whatever screenshot you share with me, according to their camera on and off, we'll consider them absent and present. So here we'll do two things henceforward, moving forward from this session onward. We'll have two attendance now. We'll have one attendance at the beginning of the class, and second attendance will be at the end of the class. So class timing begins at 12 o'clock and class timing is up to 2:15. So 2:15 would be the another slot for attendance. So we know the participant is there all through, because otherwise this whole online thing becomes a joke. And unfortunately, which I don't like, some people just attend because they want to get a degree, which I hate, you know. So at least I would not like students of my batch are here only just to get a degree on my name for that reason. So all right, our admins, we can take a note of it, and we'll have a system where two attendances would be taken henceforward. Okay, so now please go ahead, Mother Satya, read it.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. The culmination of all kinds of yoga practices lies in Bhakti Yoga. All other yogas are but means to come to the point of Bhakti in Bhakti Yoga. Yoga actually means Bhakti Yoga. All other yogas are progressions toward the destination of Bhakti Yoga. From the beginning of Karma Yoga to the end of Bhakti Yoga is a long way to self-realization. Karma Yoga without fruitive results is the beginning of this path. When Karma Yoga increases in knowledge and renunciation, the stage is called Jnana Yoga. When Jnana Yoga increases in meditation on the super soul by different physical processes and the mind is on him, it is called Ashtanga Yoga. And when one surpasses the Ashtanga Yoga and comes to the point of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, it is called Bhakti Yoga, the culmination. Factually, Bhakti Yoga is the ultimate goal, but to analyze Bhakti Yoga minutely, one has to understand these other yogas. The yogi who is progressive is therefore on the true path of eternal good fortune. One who sticks to a particular point and does not make further progress is called by that particular name, Karma Yogi, Jnana Yogi, or Dhyana Yogi, Raja Yogi, Hatha Yogi, etc. If one is fortunate enough to come to the point of Bhakti Yoga, it is to be understood that he has surpassed all other yogas.
Therefore, to become Krishna conscious is the highest stage of yoga, just as when we speak of Himalayan, we refer to the world's highest mountains, of which the highest peak, Mount Everest, is considered to be the culmination.
Hare Krishna. So here Lord Shri Krishna ends the discussion with Shraddhavan Bhajate Yamam. So Krishna says Bhakti Yogi is the best. But how does he render service? With Shraddha. But how can you have Shraddha? Shraddha can only come from knowledge. So when we meet next time, we'll begin with 7th chapter. But I just want all of you to read the 7th chapter, verse number 1. Shri Bhagwan Uvacha Maya Sakta Manha Partha Yogam Yunjan Madashraya Asamshayam Samakramam Yathagnyas Tashrunu. So here now for the first time Lord Shri Krishna will begin to speak about himself. Because you can only render service unto him when we have a knowledge about him. Just like Mother Rukmani getting attracted to Krishna because she heard about him from Narada Muni. So through hearing about the person, we get knowledge about him. So here Krishna will now begin to speak. Why? Because he said, Shraddhavan bhajate yumam. Shraddha comes from knowledge. So 7th chapter up to 12th chapter, now Krishna will go into the, all these question answers are done. Now the subject matter will be largely about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. What are his attributes? What are his vibhutis? Etc., etc. And that is what will be the discussion in the next session onwards, beginning with chapter 7. Yathagnyasi tashrunu, where Krishna wants Arjuna to hear about the glories of the Supreme Personality Godhead. With that, we come to the conclusion of our 6th chapter. With that, we conclude our syllabus for the first 6, you can call it as a unit of Bhagavad Gita, the first 6 chapters. Your exam is scheduled for 12th November, if I'm correct, or else the 13th November. I would request for all of those who are part of this batch, stick to your 12th November deadline, unless there is an exception. Because I have this multiple batches. If you write an exam in another batch, the evaluator may get confused. And even our team may get confused. You are a student of which batch. So unless it's an emergency and you have an approval from me, please do not be part of the another examination. It will be a little tricky because there are many students who are taking exam of different batches. It'll lead to a confusion. So that's my humble request to all of you. And wish you all the best with your exam preparation. We just read a purport where it is described our yoga letter. My request is, I believe that's a question part of OBA. Please do not cut copy paste. So I have already explained about that, how to write OBA. Please do not cut copy paste. If you do cut copy paste, the examiner will only do cut the marks. Okay. Express, just like Mother Chintamani had beautifully expressed in the beginning of the session when the question about yoga letter was there. So write it in your own words, in your understanding. If you want, you can use a reference. Please do not do that, because the whole idea of OBA question is to check your understanding, not your skills. How good you are at cut copy. So that should be avoided, please, because that's a whole examination thing. Otherwise, they'll cut marks, And then I understand when you lose mark, anyone would be discouraged. So I don't want all of you. You should all do the best. And we'll, I guess, pause here. Anyways, we are meeting next week also. We'll start with 7th chapter. Any questions or any comments on this discussion that we had, either about the subject matter or for the examination for that reason? Okay, Vaikunthpati Prabhu, we'll begin with you. Please go ahead.
Prabhuji, I'm going to this text 41.
Okay.
Translation, it is said, the unsuccessful yogi after many, in the purport, Prabhupada, unsuccessful yogis are divided into 2 classes. One is fallen after little progress, and one is fallen after long practice of yoga. Okay. Now here, it is explaining, in the purport, Prabhupada is explaining the yogi who falls after a short period of practice. But what happens to one who falls after a long practice of yoga?
That's in the next shloka, 42nd. The 42nd shloka is about that. The one who falls after a long practice, Kule Bhavati Dhimatam.
Right. Okay, I got it. I missed out. And in text 40, I got totally 3 questions, Prabhu. So
yes.
Okay, now text 40. Here you see in the translation again says the Supreme Person of Son of Prata, a transcendent is engaged in auspicious activities, does not meet with destruction either in this world or this spiritual world. One who does good, my friend, is never overcome by evil. Now, this last sentence, one who does good is never overcome by evil. This applies even to the materialists. Because the second, this in the purport, what is mentioned here, this from 1.5.17, etc. That part is not clear to me.
So one thing you have, when you're reading Prabhupada's writings, one thing you have to understand is not exactly Prabhupada is also sharing his realizations, or he's adding to it. For example, if you go by word to word, this is what Prabhupada is writing is correct. But therefore, sometimes we go into Sanskrit word to see what is the flow of discussion. If we just look at the word to word, the translation, if I, for example, let's refer to the Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur's translation, that says, "O son of Prata, he does not meet destruction in this life or the next. One who has done the auspicious work of yoga does not meet an unfortunate end." So here Prabhupada adding this line, "One does good, my friend, is never overcome by evil," is actually referring to a yoga practitioner only. He would, the same thing like apiche suduracharo bhajate mam anyanya bhag. Now that is words spoken for a devotee only, not for a non-devotee. It's something like, one who does good is never overcome by evil, even if he has performed and it is also apiche suduracharo, the most abominable activity. But if he's engaged, and Arjuna said, how? Shipram bhavati dharmatma. Of course, the material nature is such, mistakes happen then, but because he's still engaged, he very quickly overcomes that, like that. So this is what I can make a connection. One does not overcome by.
And then going to text 32, I think. Yeah, text 32. This is a bit, here in the purport again, and because one is in the purport, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th line, and because one in Krishna is happy, he tries to spread the knowledge of Krishna everywhere. Since the perfect yogi tries to broadcast the importance of becoming Krishna conscious, he is the best philanthropist in the world, and he is the dearest Lord. He says here. So, what's my question? So, yeah, now here comes the question. In Krishna consciousness, right from the beginning, people start preaching and do all these things. So they are also to be considered as is also a good, is a sort of a, it's not a perfect yogi, what you call it. Although in the translation says he's a perfect yogi who by comparison to his own self sees the true equality of all beings in both their happiness and their distress.
There is a lot of difference for a young sadhaka doing preaching and a mature devotee doing preaching. Young sadhaka doing preaching could be based out of his enthusiasm or could be based out of instruction. Unlike a mature sadhaka practitioner, when he or she shares a message, it is generally out of the sense that I understand these people are suffering. So there's a whole sense of set of difference in the perspective, and that is what is being mentioned about the perspective here. So a young sadhaka is not the one who can empathize with their suffering. So one of the point here is also mentioned, just like the one would like to receive happiness, similarly he likes to make others happy, which means he does not put others in distress, which means he can never do bad mouthing, he can never do fault finding, he can never do criticism. There's no question of Vaishnava Prad. But that generally doesn't happen at the neophyte stage. So empathy here is based out of an understanding of that how people are suffering due to want of Krishna consciousness. And there the person is willing to go out of his personal comfort and bear any amount of inconvenience to give Krishna consciousness to others. Just like we hear the example of His Holiness Bhakti Tirth Swami Maharaj. This is prior to his sannyas initiation. But he was the one, I believe, who started this bus party in the communist countries, where he started distributing Srila Prabhupada books. And when this is probably event happened in London, when Srila Prabhupada was there, so His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj introduced Ghanshyam that time to Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada tightly embraced Ghanshyam Prabhu, or in the future His Holiness Bhakti Swami Maharaj. With tears of gratitude, he said, "Your life is perfect." Prabhupada said those words. Your life is perfect. Now, why? Because you have taken my instructions so seriously, you put your life at risk to give out the mercy there. And Prabhupada says, your life is perfected already. So that's the point here.
So that's clear. That was exactly the question. Because right from beginning, people start preaching, but they cannot empathize with others' problems.
But that is also wonderful.
Yeah.
But that is also wonderful.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, correct. So I was just getting confused with this because in both their happiness and their distress, they are not able to share the distress. They cannot, they don't understand it that much.
But because they're doing preaching, indeed, it's the best philanthropy that they can be engaged into. And they're definitely pleasing Krishna because that's what Krishna is pleased. That's what Prabhupada quotes one of the last verses of the 18th chapter. All right, Prabhuji?
Yeah, it's clear to me.
Thank you. Ramesh Prabhu and Mother Swapna. Yes, Ramesh Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Prabhu, just a quick question. In most of the verses here, Krishna says, "This is my opinion." Being a very authoritative, Supreme Personality of Godhead, why does Krishna says my opinion?
When I read it, I felt, this is called humility. This was my take. For example, you're giving a Bhagavatam class. Imagine you're giving a Bhagavatam class. Generally, we are supposed to speak from authority, from Vedic scriptures. And when you're not doing so, and when you're interjecting with your own ideas, you're supposed to say, "My dear listeners, this is my opinion. You wish, if you like it, you accept it, or you throw it out the window." Now, this comes out of a humility. And if there is no humility, the person will keep on speaking as if he's the ultimate authority. And he can go on speculating and add speculations to it. So here, when Krishna says, "Arjuna, this is my opinion." So Arjuna, is up to you. When accept it, accept it.
But Krishna being the supreme authority, he should have, why?
Well, if he is a supreme authority, which is a fact, he is a supreme authority, then what is the need of whole Bhagavad Gita discussion? Arjuna, fight. That is enough now. Why answer his questions? Don't you know I am the supreme authority? Follow as what I say. Correct?
Okay. Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay, Hare Krishna. Mata Manju, go ahead, please.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Dandavat Pranam. Prabhu, I wanted you to discuss, you told about the yoga ladder. So could you just tell me again?
Oh, that I'll request you please hear the starting part of the lecture. Mother Chintamani did the perfect justice to it. So you can hear that and you'll get a good answer for that.
Okay, Prabhu.
This is already up on the YouTube. You just have to hear the first 15 minutes and you'll hear the answer from Mother Chintamani to your question. Is that okay? And please read the last 2-3 purports. Prabhupada again discusses about yoga ladder on that.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Hare Krishna. Sunny Prabhu, yes, go ahead.
Yes, Prabhuji, just wanted to add one thing that you told related to mind control. So, Prabhuji, this is first we must, as per my thinking, first one must have a purpose why we need to control our mind.
Oh,
because
yes.
there are
Objective should be clear.
And second, we must have a perfect path. Like I was having a lot of issues mind related issues. So after listening to a mind management series, it was absolutely clear that why we need to control and what is the path. So this was my
Then
point.
you should
Just
pray that, although I have made this course called mind management, spoken few times, may my mind also become peaceful now. Is it? I keep teaching, but it should become peaceful for me also. Happy to know that it helped you. Thank you, Sunny
Yes,
Prabhu.
Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu.
Mother Indu Radhika, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. My doubt is, Prabhu, that even for Ashtanga Yogi or after Dhyana Yoga, Lord Krishna says that anyhow, even if if they are unsuccessful in this lifetime, they will be born in a righteous family or in a devotee family in the next lifetime. Is it true for that? Means even if a bhakti yogi for all the yogas, is it true that whatever you do in this lifetime, it will be carried forward? But there's no
Oh,
difference.
yes. Yes, yes. See, word yoga means linking with Lord. You know, karma yoga, jnana yoga, ashtanga, this is yoga. Okay, so these all linking to the Lord. One could be linked to the directly to the Lord, like in our case. Our karma yoga becomes bhakti yoga by the grace of Srila Prabhupada. Because he taught us who is the Supreme Personality Godhead. Now, for Jnani Yogi who is still wondering about, who knows absolute truth, but who is still wondering out who is that Supreme, like we have an example of Atri Muni. He was worshipping, and then the Trinity appeared, Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, and he had a fantastic question to ask. Why all of you have come? I was calling for the absolute. You know, they were confused. You know, this is a really interesting welcome prayer. You know, why all of you have come? I was worshipping the absolute. So he didn't had that clarity of absolute there. You know, but you know, he's considered one of the very profound yogis. So, but yoga means it's a linking process, and this is for all the yogis. You would be there is no loss of whatever credit you have earned in this lifetime. All right.
Prabhuji, that means that if we are doing bhakti yoga, we can say that we are almost on the topmost ladder. We are reaching the top faster.
Yeah,
In other
with the
yogas,
topmost
actually
term is
climbing
very
up, even
correct.
in
The
their next lifetimes.
topmost term itself is very dangerous for an intoxicated mind.
No, I'm just trying to understand, Prabhu.
Yeah. So we are not actually on the topmost point right now. We are not even struggling to practice Nishkam Karma Yoga. Bhakti Yoga, in general, this is what our acharyas have made it so easy for us. But Bhakti Yoga means you want to read 12th chapter, verse number 8. You know, that's an answer for you what exactly Bhakti Yoga is. And what we are is probably at 12.9 or 12.10, where we are at a stage. So we are not at the topmost point right now. But I understood your question. I was just joking on that way.
But ultimately, we'll reach there.
Yeah, I mean, yes.
When
Everyone will
compared
reach.
to other yogas, we don't have such a long way to go when compared to other yogas. That's what I
Yes,
mean.
the whole reason is because we have Prabhupada. We have Brahma Madhav Gaudiya Parampara. That's the whole reason for it. You know, and of course, we need to be serious and sincere about our practice, and then the whole thing will become pretty quick if that happens by their grace. Correct. Yes, Mother Jyoti.
Hare
Unmute,
Krishna,
please.
Prabhuji.
Yes, Mother.
Prabhuji, in text 47, Prabhupada in the purport writes that one who sticks to a particular point and does not make further progress is called by that particular name, like Karma Yogi, Jnana Yogi. So my question is regarding Jnana Yogi, like what we understand is Jnana Yogis are generally Mayavadi philosophies. But up till now,
Potentially
what we read about,
could be. Potentially could be there because they're searching. I mean, one way is to call them all them Mayavadis is not correct. You know, so because according to Ishopanishad, they are the biggest offenders. So we cannot call all Jnana Yogis as Mayavadis. Generally, it is refers to Jnana Yogis impersonalists. And impersonalists and Mayavadis are two different categories. Mayavadis are offenders. Impersonalists is just like, you know, four Kumaras were impersonalists. But when they went to Vaikuntha, when they smelled the fragrance of Tulsi Maharani, by the mercy of Tulsi Maharani, they became personalists. So that's the difference. I don't know where exactly it is mentioned that Jnana Yogi is Mayavadi. This is an interpolation. At my end, I would call them impersonalist.
but Prabhuji, impersonalist means that they reject the personal feature of the Lord.
See, not like that. For them, they do not have a realization of the personal form of the Lord.
Okay.
They have only realization. See, those who reject are called as Mayavadis. That's the difference between Mayavadis and impersonalists. Now, therefore, when we had a discussion on the subject matter, I said it's very difficult for me to give you an example from the modern day who is an impersonalist. Most of the people are Mayavadis. You know, impersonalist example, we can give a Sukdev Goswami at the beginning, you know, and then four Kumaras. And why they became devotees because they were not offenders. If they were offenders, they wouldn't have become the devotees. And according to Ishopanishad, those who are atheists, worse than them are the Mayavadis. So that way.
Oh.
Fine.